Good evening.
That is a monkey.
Welcome to the North Kingstown School Committee meeting of Monday, March 28th, 2011. Would all please stand for the salute to the flag? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Could I please have the roll call?
William Mudge.
Present.
Joe Thompson.
Here.
Linda Avanzado. Melvoy Benson.
Here.
Kimberly Page. Here. Richard Welsh.
Here.
Larry Cerisi.
Here.
Julia Held. Here. Representative.
Here.
Thank you.
Would the clerk please read the calendars?
Policy Subcommittee at 1 p.m. in Central Administration Building. April 11th, joint public hearing with the Town Council, 7:30 p.m. at North Kingstown High School. There is also a Wellness Subcommittee at 3:30 in the Central Administration Building. April 12th, School Committee Work Session, 7 p.m. April 18th to April 22nd, Spring Recess. April 22nd is Good Friday. All school offices are closed. April 26th, School Committee Business Meeting, 7 p.m., North Kingstown High School.
Thank you. We're now going to have a presentation by Dr. Phil Auger on the NECAP results. Dr. Auger.
Here we go. Well, good evening, everybody. It's that time of year where I get the job of coming before you with our latest NECAP scores. As you recall, a few months ago, I came before you with the science scores, and in the fall, in November, we had our students take tests in reading, writing, and math. Those scores come back to us in January, and they take a little bit of time to process, and we make sure that they are correct. And now we're at a point where I can present them to you. And I'm pleased to announce that, the scores are good, and they reflect very positively on the North Kingstown School District and the hard work that our teachers and administrators, and especially our students, have been doing. So I'd like to show you the scores in some context tonight and talk to you about some of the details, and then I'll be happy to take some questions. For those of you who are sitting over here, maybe you may want to move to this side. I hope everyone can see. This is the best we can do with the screen tonight. Our scores in context. We use NECAP test scores. They are the benchmark in Rhode Island for how we're doing academically in reading and writing and math. We also use a lot of other assessments that we also do pretty well on in North Kingstown, like the NWEA, Ames-Webb, AP tests, SATs. There are lots of things that we use to determine how well we're doing. Before I show you a lot of charts and statistics, I want to talk to you about the validity of these scores. A lot of this you have to kind of take in context. There are different sets of students from year to year. There's a new configuration of elementary schools in our district, so sometimes when you're looking at scores, you're looking at kids at one school that it reports, and a lot of those kids were at a lot of different schools last year before they came. So at the elementary level, there's kind of a shuffle that isn't necessarily accounted for in all of the scores. And there are alignment issues with the current tests and with all the tests. And I think that's especially true in writing. And in high school writing, you're going to see that played out. And when I get to that, I'll talk about that a little bit more. Overall, when we get this data, we get scores that reflect all of our students, all combined. The number of kids who have reached proficiency, grades 3 through 8 and grade 11 throughout the district. And as you can see, the state line is in blue here, going up, and the North Kingstown line is also going up, a good distance above the state line. And overall, in reading, North Kingstown is 10th in the state. And I've compared us to 31 other like school districts. There are some school districts that aren't necessarily like us, like Block Island, for instance, or Jamestown, that doesn't have a high school because they send their kids here, Little Compton, things like that. So I've compared us to districts that are K-12. And of that, we're in the top third here in reading. In math, even though the score is a little bit lower, comparatively speaking, we're 7th out of 31 districts in the state. So we're in good shape. You can get better, but we're in good shape. In writing, we are 7th at the elementary level, we're 7th at the middle level, and at the high school level, we're 16th. And now last year, we were about 9th at the high school level. And I'm going to show you a little bit later that writing score seems to fluctuate a lot. You'll see one year where North Kingstown went up 20 points. The next year, we went down about 10. And the issue with that test is that it's not always the same test. So our teachers prepare our students, say, for a persuasive essay, and once they get to the test, it's a very different kind of essay. So from year to year, you'll see jumps in all of the school districts. I know of one assistant superintendent who told me her school district went down 30 points this year. And they're a very strong school district. They were preparing for one kind of writing sample, and they got another. But overall, we're still doing very well across the district in writing. In elementary reading, while it's a little harder to detect exactly where we rank because they don't list school districts by elementary level, they list them school for school. But we are very good in reading, and I've given you the 5th grade score here. It's pretty indicative of how we do with the 4th and the 5th grade. But this, I'm giving you kind of the exit years when they leave the elementary levels. I'm going to give you 5, 8, and then 11. So the elementary reading, as you can see, we're pretty flat there, somewhere between 82% and 77% is our recent year. In math, the level is still very strong, again, between around 82 and 78, right around the same level. And those are both considered very strong statewide. At the middle level, we're increasing at an even better rate. So we were at 77 a few years ago. Now we're up to 84%. And last year we were even at 85. So the trend line is good there. And that's middle level reading. And in middle level math, we were at 64 a few years ago. We're at 79 this year. So there's a lot of good gains happening at the middle level in math. And again, these are pretty strong statewide, these scores. High school reading, where the comparisons now get a little bit easier because you're dealing with one school and they compare high schools by district and not necessarily by school. So we can see that at the high school, our reading, we're 9th in the state. And it's a very strong score. 87% of our kids are proficient in reading. One of the best scores that we have. In math, the scores, this is the tough area statewide. You'll notice that the score here is almost half of what it is in reading, 48%. But even in a school where 48% of our students are successful in math, we're even higher, relatively speaking, to the rest of the state. In math, we're 8th in the state. In reading, we're 9th in the state at the high school level. This is a very important slide. This slide is for students who are below the bar, meaning that they would score a 1 on the state test in 11th grade. In reading, we have 2% of our students who are below that bar. And if the rules of 2014 existed today, they would not graduate based on that score. They'd have to take their test over again. We were at 4% last year. We've reduced that. We put it in half. It's now 2% of our students who are below that bar. And we're still doing everything we possibly can to make sure that number is 0 when the time comes. Math, remember I said that's a tough area. Math, we're at 19% of our students did not go above a 1 out of 4 on that score. And therefore would have to have, some remediation and would have to take the test again as a senior under the 2014 rules. Our score last year was 26, so we brought that number down 7 points, and we are now half of what the state is. This is a real warning. This is a tough number for the state to hold on to, because according to this, if this number stayed the same for the graduates of 2014, there would be 38% of the students in Rhode Island not graduating from high school. So that's a substantial number. In North Kingstown, that's down to 19. And we have things in place right now where we're not waiting for 2014 to give those kids the remediation that they need. Their parents are contacted, they're contacted, they know they're in that group. We're doing things with them right now to get them where they need to be. The high school writing, remember I talked to you about that number and how there's a lot of fluctuation. You notice in 2007 we were at 58, we went down to 45, a drop of 13. The following year we went up 20, and this year we went down 9. All the other numbers are about 2 points apart year to year. So you can see there's a lot of fluctuation, as I mentioned. For the graduation rate, 86% of North Kingstown High School students graduate in 4 years. The bar for the state to be, where they want you to be this year is 76.7%. So we're well above that. There is also now considered a 5-year graduation rate. And for that one, North Kingstown does an especially good job. We have 93% of our students graduate in 5 years. Now, we would, of course, like that to be 100%. But 93% puts us as 3rd in the state for graduation rate. That is quite an accomplishment. When you consider that 77% for 4 years and 79% for 5 years is the state average for graduation rate. And remember I told you that the bar is 76.7? That means that what the state of Rhode Island is calling AYP, adequate yearly progress. About half of the high schools in the state are not making adequate yearly progress based alone on the dropout rate. It is a significant problem in the state of Rhode Island, but it's not so much of a problem over here. It's still unacceptable and we need to do better, but relatively speaking, we're in pretty good shape. I also want to point out to you, I talked about that bar at for the graduates who are coming through in 2014 and not being at a 1. The real goals right now from RIDE and what we've needed to do with the commissioner's review, remember we've been talking a lot about that over the last few years, is dealing with the students who are having the hardest time and bringing them up. And North Kingstown is doing that particularly well right now. These are special education reading scores over the last 2 years. The blue is this year, the gold is last year. You can see that so many more of our students who are in special education are gaining proficiency now on the state test. That's at each grade level. In math, same kind of trend holds from 2 years ago to this year. We're doing more in this district with, you've heard the term RTI, response to intervention. When kids are having a hard time and they're being challenged, we're doing more system-wide to work with those kids, find out what's wrong, and deal with it. And this is where it's paying off. This number is remarkable. These numbers are remarkable right here. It's still, look at the 11th grade. I mean, it is still incredibly low. But even with that went up. We doubled that score in 1 year. So, and North Kingstown is not alone with high school math being a problem. A lot of us around the state are working on that number in particular. This is another statistic. I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this tonight, but I couldn't resist. And on April 12th, there is a presentation about this issue in North Kingstown. That is homelessness. Last week, on the 17th, there was an article in the Providence Journal. And this is something that I had been aware of, but it is all of a sudden something that a lot of people have been asking me about in the last week or two. The number of homeless students in Rhode Island has more than doubled in the last 5 years, from 460 in 2005 to nearly 1,000 in 2010. Here are the 11 districts with the most homeless students, and you'll see that North Kingstown is number 2 in that regard. North Kingstown is number 2, with 189 of our students, 189 of these test takers are homeless. That's a lot to deal with. And when you put these scores in that context, I think it takes on a whole new, level of significance. It does for me anyway. And you can see that there are 11 districts listed here. A lot of districts aren't even listed because they're lower than that 28. And on the 12th, we've invited some folks here to talk about that particular issue and the details about why North Kingstown is in that position right there and what the conditions are and what we're doing about it in North Kingstown to work with kids who, have major disruption in their family life, such as homelessness. So that's what I have for you tonight, everybody. I don't know if you would have some questions for me, and I'll be happy to take any questions from the audience as well once the school committee is completed.
Thank you, Dr. Auger.
Sure.
Mr. Mudge.
Thank you. First of all, numbers lie and lies. Numbers, we hear all, that all the time. But it's very difficult to interpret all of these results.
Sure.
Based on everything that's going on, and I understand that. I thought I read someplace, and you can help correct me, that a deviation of 2 or 3 points either way is really insignificant in terms of the testing and so forth and so on.
It roughly means that you're staying the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Okay, so that's...
Of course, you want to see that number going up instead of down, but...
Yeah, but if you go from
Right.
from 1 to -1 to +1, that's really not explainable. It's within the
Sure.
scope, okay? So I understand that. But, math gets me to some degree, okay, 38%. Because if I have a community and a system, whether I'm, say, East Greenwich or Barrington or, unfortunately, possibly Central Falls, you have a different environment with the kids and so forth and
Sure.
so on. So my question is, when it comes to mathematics, what level is the expected achievement level for a passing grade? In other words, does every student have to take Algebra 1, Algebra 2, trig, geometry, calculus, or whatever?
The understanding is that students would take Algebra 1, geometry, and some Algebra 2 by the time they take the test.
Right, and that's
the expectation.
That's irrespective of whether those kids are really going to go on and do something with it or something else. Okay?
That's right.
Now,
The thinking from the state,
right.
a lot of minds, more educationally savvy than mine, determined that that level of attainment, getting to Algebra 2, is significant for your skills in the workforce.
Sure,
that you may not decide to do anything with that mathematics knowledge, but you have a lot of options because of it.
Right, but the expectation of the community, a wealthy community, quite frankly, of a Barrington, East Greenwich, North Kingstown, you're going to get more students taking that plus the AP classes. So obviously your grade should be, a little bit higher than other schools. So that's a real tough one to digest as far as I'm concerned, the mathematics.
Well, North Kingstown, you're right that a lot of students in North Kingstown take AP classes, but, North Kingstown is a significantly bigger school than Barrington and East Greenwich. So while we have, that community that you're talking about, we also have a lot of students who, are having a hard time.
Well, like special ed, they include the special ed kids.
Oh, yeah.
Expected
Yeah,
to be, the whole
Right.
special ed kid supposed to be taking all these. So that's a really difficult one
Right.
to me to chew on. I think something that it's been hard in North Kingstown to really go from year to year to assess our improvements, and I've tried to study that, is the fact that since 2003, I think we've had like 4 different configurations of elementary, the schools here and so forth and so on. So I got to believe that that's affecting this, and hopefully the school committee did last year by going back to basically the K through 6 should help show some improvement in these things later.
I tend to think so. The evidence will be the evidence, that shows this forward. But, right now it's a little tough to look at the elementary level because of that switch that just happened last year. It's a one-time kind of switch, and this test occurred for kids in October. So they were really in, there were a lot of kids that took this test being in a new school for about 6 weeks.
Finally, my comment is on your graph up there with the homeless kids. I've done a little homework there, and that relates, and I think one of the points is going to be, is to the educational support we're getting from the state of Rhode Island. Okay? And I think we're getting shortchanged, quite frankly. And I would like to just make one comment. I'm going to pass this to committee. The new education formula was $8,200 for this, and then $4,042 for free and reduced lunches. You realize that the city of Providence, every child is considered to have a free and reduced lunch? $12,500 again for 8. Not North Kingstown. So, again, I think the point's well taken here. We have another problem here. We have problems with these special kids that we've got to go out and make sure that we're getting a fair share of the state aid on this. So that's the message I get out of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mudge. Mrs. Spencer?
Yes, thank you, Dr. O.J. Ford, and I have a question.
Sure.
When my research concerning and following what you said concerning test scores, one of the main things that disturbed me is the drop between junior high and high school. Now, when we look at that, there are several factors. You mentioned the homeless, and I think we should explain to the audience, if they're thinking the homeless or people don't have nowhere to stay, if you're a young couple and you have a child in school and you're living with your parents, under state law, that's considered homeless. So the homeless is really not as deep as we say it, but the concern is that drop between junior high and high school. And did you measure that by the students who were in our school system the last year? I think that has a bearing on the test scores, and the number of students that was their first year in junior high school to take this course.
The number that I used for the middle schools was 8th grade. So most of those students would have been in their middle school for 6th and 7th grade as well.
So we didn't have a large number. That's what I'm
No. I don't. The homeless population, I'm pretty certain, is spread out throughout the district. It's not, concentrated at any one particular level.
If you give a kid taking a test this year in a new school and he wasn't in that school last year, I think that will give in that school system for their town, I think that'll give a pretty good indication.
Yeah, and that's not just a North Kingstown problem either, as I know you realize that, Mrs. Benson, but just for the sake of the audience, I mean, this is something that is nationwide.
That's what I was
test
saying,
scores,
it's nationwide,
yeah.
and reading on the test scores and things, that was one of the things. Number two, I liked very much what you said concerning the remediation of the things that the kids missed in the tests.
Right.
Because if they were taking the tests in the 8th grade, then in a year and a half they'll be in 10th grade.
Right.
And you have a strong plan for remediation.
Well, there's a before and an after. The state regulations, and this is something North Kingstown already does. We could probably do a better job at it, but we already do it, and that is to identify the types of kids who are going to have a hard time when they're already in 6th grade. So when they're entering the middle school, and we know a lot of these kids when they're in the 3rd grade and the 2nd grade. And that is, when kids are really having a hard time and they're behind grade level in reading or in math, we need to be doing something about it right away. We can't wait till they're in high school.
No, you're losing.
But then, if they don't make the score on the high school test, then we have to do something after they're done. And that is also state law, mandated with the high school regulations for 2014 and the graduation rate and all that. So students at that point would have another option, another chance to take the test. They would also have an option to take, if they don't pass that, they would take an alternate test that RIDE is yet to put together. And if they don't take care of that, there is a plan to talk about the growth that they would have made in that time. And the details are yet to come out about that piece. But when they do, I'll definitely be letting the school committee know about that.
My concern wasn't so much, and it's rooted in the test, but I'm very concerned about after you identify the remediation that we are giving these children, because different things happen to children when they take tests. Some freeze up and, you know, and I think I read in one article say that the tests require a certain kind of thinking, and how the electronic, I call them gadgets, in the classroom, they can't, if they read something and say, give your opinion, they're so used to the electronic gadget that they can't give their opinion. So my thing is helping the student and the remediation that you will be giving the student. You're going to always have poor test takers. And I think that what you said was very good, and you mentioned that you had that. And that's the part I would like to see go on and center on the help for the child, not the test score.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
Dr. Ajay, you had something about yearly progress, AYP.
Yes.
Does that refer to test scores only, or does it also refer to your retention or graduation rate? I was just wondering if it's just the testing.
It has to do with graduation rate as well.
So you're required to come up with an average yearly progress or annual yearly progress in all these regards?
As a matter of fact, this year the bar for graduation is 76.7. That number, because we're in the end of the range for No Child Left Behind, you all know No Child Left Behind ends in 2014, unless the federal government does something different with it. Right now, for the last 3 years, the scores have remained, the benchmark has remained roughly the same. As a matter of fact, it's remained exactly the same for 3 years. It was a 3-year period where we had to get the same score every year. The last few years, the thinking is by this point, schools should be in such good shape. Now, they're thinking this back in 2002, that schools should be in such good shape that they'd make significant moves in these last few years. So next year, the bar for graduation rate goes up 4 points, and it will go up 4 points each year after that. The bar for math goes up 9 points, as does, and I think reading is probably a little less because it's closer to 100 already. But the idea, the ideal world that the No Child Left Behind was put together back in 2001, 2002, is that 100% of our students will be proficient by 2014. And you can see the state averages there. The state has a ways to go, as does every state. We're not alone in that. And so, you know, what the federal government does in looking at that law and updating it over the next few months or year or so is going to be significant. Because, like I said, I'm thinking, according to that data, that by the middle of this year, when the AYP results come out, they're going to be listing about half the high schools in the state of Rhode Island as not making adequate yearly progress. And, you know, what I think of that is not really relevant here, but I don't think much of it.
I might agree with you, because what I'm thinking is, if you have a school that, let's say, has a 50% on something, and they go up to 70%.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
They've gone up 20%. But if you've got a school that's at 85 or 90 or 95%, and they only can squeak up to maybe 96%,
Right.
do you get dinged as a school for
Well,
not hitting the AYP numbers as well as the one that went from 50 to 70?
Technically, you know, there's a lot of details in the AYP analysis. There's an error band that if you don't quite fall in. There's this thing called safe harbor. If you fall close enough, you know, this sort of thing. But what you just said is true. If you don't hit that mark, even though you just went up 20 points, you had a remarkable gain in this past school year, but you didn't meet that mark you're supposed to meet, you would be considered not meeting adequate yearly progress.
And I'm thinking that since we have our representatives here, maybe we could make a pitch for asking them to use maybe a secondary measure, which would be how far above the state average line that your school is, so that if you are at 95 and you only went up by 1%, maybe you're getting dinged on the AYP, but the Rhode Island average is maybe down here in the 70s.
Right.
So now you're a hero because you're so far up. I mean, I want the school to be very successful, but it seems to me like the more successful you get, the harder it gets to catch a break on the AYP number.
Well, that philosophy seems to be what the commissioner and the regents have gone to on the state, when they look at that growth model where if you still didn't make the bar, but you've shown a lot of growth between your junior and senior year, they would, consider you for graduation. But this law, even though our state reps are here, is a federal law. This is Washington now, and this applies to all the states in the country. And so I'm just wondering, it's going to be another couple of months before all of the AYP. We have received word that our district has made AYP. There's a lot of other details that I will report to you when this becomes public a couple of months from now. But it just seems to me there are a lot of districts who are not going to make AYP even this year. Much less, I don't know if anyone's going to make it in 2014 with those, with 100%. That's a tall order. It's what we should all be shooting for, but it's a tall order.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mrs. Page.
So, Dr. Thornton, Dr. Roget, I'm encouraged to see that the scores have gone up. And so that'll lead into my question of what are we doing to keep them going up?
Well, I think the most encouraging part of all this is the data that I showed you on, the lowest performing students on the state test and the special ed scores. A lot of our attention over the last couple of years has been about, RTI and working with students who, the things that we need to do as a school district, and when you're a big school district, it makes it all the harder, and that is identifying who's having a problem and figuring out what we need to do for them, and then finding the resources to address their problem. One teacher in a room with 20-something students, all by that teacher's self, is not going to be able to do that if there are, 10 kids in the room that have significant problems and they're all a different problem. So there's got to be other places where they can turn to. And sometimes that's a special educator, and sometimes that's a paraprofessional, and sometimes it's a parent volunteer, and sometimes it's another teacher with a good idea in the building, or the fact that they use a DI block, a differentiated instruction block, where it says, okay, these 10 kids over here, or these 5 kids are having the same kind of problem. I'll take them for the next hour and work on that problem, and you work on with these kids who've already gotten it and they want to move ahead. So more and more of that is happening. I think we do a better job of that at the elementary and middle level than we do at the high school level, but it's moving to the high school level too. And as you can see, those lowest performing students at the high school level, there's fewer of them on that state test, and that's one indication. But there's a lot of indications that we're doing more to make sure kids are reaching the bars that they need to reach to be successful,
I know that Wright has said that we only have a limited time for NECAP before we switch to the next test.
Yes.
So how many more years do we have with NECAP, are they predicting?
A couple more years. The next test is called the Common Core. It is a test that 48 states are involved in. The only 2 states that are not involved in it are Texas and Alaska. And it is a state initiative. And there are a lot of details about the Common Core that aren't, a lot we know about and a lot we don't know about. For instance, we have not seen the test for the Common Core. It is called the PARCC test, P-A-R-C-C. And of the 48 states, about 28 of those states are using that as their assessment. The other group of states are using another assessment to assess the same standards. I don't know why there's 2 tests, but that's the way they're doing it. Rhode Island is part of the group. In fact, they're one of the lead members of the group for the PARCC test. They have that position because of the Race to the Top grant, and so they're kind of on the UN leadership team, if you will, for setting up this PARCC test. So they're one of the states that determines how this test is going to be put together, and they're really pushing for a NECAP-style type test because they believe in that format for a while. And what I feel we need as a district is a lot of clarity about what's on that test. You know, the last couple of years, we've been talking a lot about assessment, common assessments, and knowing what's on the assessment, and starting there. If we know what's on the assessment and work backwards, you know, we know this is where you need to be, so we're going to gear our instruction to get you ready for that particular test. And so the districts in Rhode Island and all over the country are chomping at the bit to find out what's on that test and to get more information about the standards. Our teachers start training on those standards in May. And, you know, there's time, but, you know, over the next 2 years, there's going to be a lot more and more training about those standards, and we'll be ready to go in 2014. And at that point, the state test it happens 4 times a year. It'll happen at the end of each quarter. And the format they're looking at for grades 5 through 11 is an electronic test. Grades 3 and 4 would still be on paper. 5 through 11 would be 4 times a year where kids get on a computer and do the test that way. And as you can imagine, talk about, you know, resources and bandwidth and all the things that go with making sure the computers are going to run right on a particular day. There's a lot of anxiety about that nationwide. And so there's a lot of those kinds of details to figure out before then. But good question.
You've answered all my follow-on questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Auger. Mr. Cerisi, while it has nothing directly to do with the kneecap, it's something that you mentioned about the dropout rate. How are we doing compared to years gone by?
Oh, boy, I should know that. I don't have that. Phil, would you know that?
I can tell you the special.
Okay.
I only know special ed numbers. We went up 13% last year and 10% this year.
When you say up,
Up from
that's
below
improving?
70s as improvements.
Okay. And how is that based? Is that based on graduation?
Well, in special ed, graduation is defined as either when they receive their diploma or when their transition services are up at the age of 21, up to the age of 21. So we're still trying to determine how the state defines whether or not our fifth-year students are actually considered to be graduates or dropouts. We do think they're going to be considered to be graduates because we do provide many of our students 5, 6, and sometimes 7 years of additional service. Overall, our graduation rates are up. And that's across the board, but especially in special ed.
I don't know how the rest of the committee feels about it, but I think I would like to see what's happened over the last 5 years and how we're progressing, hopefully, in improving the dropout rate.
Sure.
Regardless of what the state uses, if you can give us some guidelines so that, you know, we know that if we have a problem that we can work on, et cetera. I think I, for one, am in the dock about how many bodies are not dropping out for whatever reasons.
Right.
And I think that's important. We have a job to do. And I think there's pending legislation right now to talk about the children having to go to school until 18, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's in HEW right now on the state level. Okay. All set? Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Auger. Okay. Now we'll go to citizens' comments. We have 15 minutes for citizens' comments. Please keep your comments confined to school committee matters, school department matters, and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less so that we can move on. Mr. Big.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Dick B., 5 Seagrass Way. I rise tonight only to ask you to maybe do something that would be good for the community, and it's the stimulus fund. Suddenly this year we, according to the superintendent's budget, your budget, we've gotten almost $2 million of surplus. I would ask this committee to find out about the stimulus money, whether or not that surplus is primarily stimulus money, which if it's in an operating budget is really not a good idea because, as you all know, if it's used once, that's the only time you can use it, and you'll be in the hole next year. But I do think that coming before the town council on the 11th is the public hearing, and I think the school committee should get an accounting and have an accountability for where that, all of that so-called surplus money came from. And I hope you do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. B. Is there anyone else? Please state your name.
Gregory Blasbalg, 70 Whitman Drive. I just wanted to take a moment, first of all, to thank you all for what you do. I know you have a very difficult job, but as most of you know, I attend most of your meetings, and I do want to mention that over the past few months, I think there's been a little bit of a difficulty as a group, not individually, but as a group with the level of, not necessarily being always professional and getting the job that we all need to get done. And I just want to ask you folks, to the extent that you can, to take a step back and remember that each of you, you're absolutely entitled to each of your opinions, and that there's a point where you need to agree to disagree and move on so that we can all get what we need to get done. I think it's really important. And it's not something that's leveled to any individual. If there's any of you that thinks that someone else is a problem, I think you need to recognize that you are appointed together as a group. You act as a committee, you succeed or you fail as a committee. It's not about individuals, it's about working together. And I think I just want to ask that you try to do that to fulfill your responsibility to the citizens that elected you, and more importantly, to the students of our district that depend on you. And I don't mean it to be critical, I just want to hope you take a step and think about that for a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Dave Abedesian, teacher here at the high school. And Mr. Welch, something just came to mind when you were asking about the dropout rate. I think what would be really helpful to the staff, at least here at the high school, is that when we see names of students who have dropped out, if there was some type of exit interview for those kids and the data was collected so that the staff could see why that particular student, we don't have to associate the name with the comments, but that data was collected and was given back to the staff so we knew why that particular student dropped out, and maybe we could address some of the concerns of why there was a disconnect for that student. I think it'd be very valuable moving forward to address the dropout rate here at the high school.
Thank you.
If later on, I don't know if you're going to get to school calendar, but I'd like to comment on it then.
We hope to. Dr. Thornton, would you just respond to that exit interview?
We can certainly, I'll look at that, Mr. Welch.
Okay.
I think what Mr. Welch is referring to is that I know we have a policy to do an exit interview, and I believe one of the principals at the high school does it, but I don't think that we disseminate any of the information to the high school teachers.
Thank you for your information on that. Okay. Since there are no more citizens that want to make comments, we'll move on to the next section. We're going to jump down to new business, item A, since we have 3 members of our legislative body present this evening by invitation. Representative Larry Earhart, Representative Doreen Costa, and Senator Hodson. I'm sorry, I can't remember your first name, sir. I'm sorry? Dawson. Thank you. Help of the committee. If you folks would like to give us, from your perspective, a brief opinion about where we are budget-wise, I know it's early, and what you would like to say about things that are going on before we address maybe a few specifics.
I'd be happy. Are we live here?
Yes.
There we go.
You can remove it.
All right. As a member of the House Finance Committee, I'm probably in the best position to do that, although I don't mean to imply that I can tell you with any certainty as to what's going to be going on. House Finance Committee began last week its detailed hearings on the governor's budget. We have 3 more weeks to do that. We'll be finished just when you're ready to go on your April break. And for those of you who are familiar with the process, it's a very detailed sequence. Every department head comes in before the committee, and a similar process takes takes place over in the Senate as well, but House tends to go into much more detail. I'll make no bones about it. I am on record as opposing the budget as submitted. Next year, we have about we're facing about a $300 million deficit. It's a figure that we've been looking at plus or minus for the last 12 months, so it comes as no surprise. It's primarily triggered by the exhaustion of the stimulus funds from Washington. Unfortunately, the governor has chosen to plug that budget, and this is not my evaluation, but this is in the words of the staff to the House Finance Committee from the report they have issued, which is up and available on the House Fiscal Staff website. The budget has been primarily plugged with the sales tax increases, about $170 million, a number of one-time fixes, including one that affects you folks, and that is the federal education job funds. Some $32 million will be downstreamed to the districts and used to replace money that the state otherwise would have provided. So by and large, it's a very disappointing budget from that point of view, and there's going to be a lot of discussion and debate over the next couple of months. How it will turn out, I cannot say at this point, but there's certainly a growing wave of opposition to the tax increase and concern that we haven't really dealt with the with the cost problems. There's an excellent editorial in today's Providence Journal by Mayor Fung of Cranston. This is not related to education, but it is illustrative, referring to a program that's being proposed called MAST, M-A-S-T, which was going to be downstreaming some small amounts of additional funds to the cities and towns, those cities and towns that were keeping their pension contributions up to snuff. Unfortunately, as Mayor Fung pointed out, while it was providing a few $1 million to assist with pension contributions, it wasn't doing anything to help with cities and towns to do a better job of managing their costs. Similarly, for the school activities, there's nothing in the budget that talks about any sort of mandate relief, and I know that seems to be, it is a perennial issue for schools. There are a lot of theoretical debates back and forth, but there is no mandate relief on education as far as I'm aware. The good news as far as schools are concerned is that basically the governor has proposed carrying on with the aid to education formula that was passed last year, where under North Kingstown does not suffer much damage. You recall, those of you who were following it last year, the early versions of that aid to education formula were going to hit North Kingstown, I think something well in excess of $1 million. But that, between Representative Carter and myself and a few others, we managed to keep North Kingstown whole in that process. And I think the numbers that you're seeing in aid to education are pretty much what you had expected. So that I wish I had some really great news to tell you, but it's not there. And it's not just Rhode Island. We shouldn't feel picked upon or unique in that. This is a problem that's being faced around the country and to some extent around the world. I don't know if my colleagues want to add anything to that, or if I can answer any questions of a general nature.
Does anyone have any questions at this point?
Representative?
Mr. Chair, do you want to direct the question, or shall I?
Mr. Thompson.
I've got a sheet here that has House bills that affect education, spelled EFF instead of AFF. And I'm on here, you're listed as H5400. Could you give us a pitch for that or tell us what that's about?
I appreciate the compliment, Mr. Thompson. The lighting in here is very low. The sound system isn't the greatest, and I certainly haven't memorized bill numbers. Can you tell me what 5400 would be?
Well, it says here, HEW Committee, Educational Services to Very Young.
I'm not familiar with that bill, and I'm not on the HEW committee.
Sorry. How about H 5392, Rep. Earhart, Finance Committee State Aid - Level Support?
All right. That one I am familiar with. As the sponsor, yes. I have co-sponsored with, along with Representative Costa and Senator Hodgson, in fact, has sponsored a comparable bill over on the Senate side, which deals with maintenance of education, maintenance of effort in community aid to education. Last year's budget, when it was finally enacted, allowed cities and towns to reduce the town contribution to the school systems to 95% of the previous year's level, should they choose to do so. That was part of last year's Budget Act, which, even though it was discussed beginning in February, it wasn't passed until June. So when it was actually finally enacted, it was really too late. School committees had enacted their budgets for the succeeding year. Anticipating that a similar need existed this year, I submitted legislation which was heard in House Finance a couple of weeks ago that would carry that privilege forward to fiscal year 2012. That is, would allow a town to reduce its contribution to their school committees to 95% of the previous level. I don't expect that that's a topic that's particularly exciting for you folks, but that's what it is. And it was heard by Finance, and at this point I cannot estimate what its likelihood of success is. But it's symptomatic of the fact that at city and town level, at state level, and at national level, most experts and most economists agree that we simply cannot keep spending the way we have in the past. And until we recognize that and face up to it, we're not going to get ourselves out of these problems. Thank you.
Mr. Mudge.
Thank you. Representative Earhart, I'd given you a sheet earlier, and I'm going to pass it into the school committee also. And, Mr. Chairman, this is something that I added that we got at our meeting Saturday. I'm a little disappointed in the state aid formula the way it happened, because to my way of thinking, North Kingstown got dumped on. Okay? We got $10.3 million in aid last year. We're going to get 10.1 this year. We're going to lose $163 million from last year. With the funding formula change that you put in, which was good, okay, North Kingstown would have received an extra $46,000, okay, because of the formula. What really happened in these government numbers that have been just recently put out, in fact, North Kingstown is going to lose $163,000 in revenue, or $210,000 from the formula that you fought for. I don't know what happened in between, but I know we're on a short stick for $210,000. And one of the things that bothers me about that is, which I was unaware of, I'll be honest with you, that there's a big contribution now for transportation throughout the state. And North Kingstown doesn't get a penny. Now, they're pumping back into transportation itself, okay, something like $2 million for districts. I don't know how this got through there. But, in fact, in my opinion is, okay, the formula, which was a good one, well-intended, we'd have had the $46,000 increase. All of a sudden, they're taking away from some of us, principally in the outer ring of the state. They juggle the money around, so other people are getting money, and we're getting the short end. For example, Bristol Warren is collecting close to $400,000 in transportation. Yeah, they were a regional district, but we could put them in our backyard practically. So, yes, they were a regional district, and they were getting they were getting compensated for that through the construction programs and so forth and so on. So somebody ran something through, okay, that suddenly all these other districts are collecting about $2 million in aid, and we're getting shortchanged. I'm really, really disappointed in that. I'm sure it's not your fault. But I want to make sure you're cognizant of that, because
Mr. Mudge, if you'll make sure to remind me of that by email, and I'm sure you will. I have a general recollection, and as I say, this is a dark room, and I don't have my glasses on, so I'm not going to try to go over individual numbers like that in this setting. But I have a general recollection from last year, and perhaps Superintendent Thornton can would have some memory as well, that North Kingstown was not included in that transportation category because what we're doing, our own busing. Is that correct?
Memory serves, state law exempts a few districts, NK's one of them.
Yeah, but precisely.
And so there was a structural reason why we were not in that.
Well, there's a structural reason, but my point is we've been paying for our transportation like other districts, and why are we cutting short? The structural change is inappropriate, I guess is what I'm saying. We got the short end of the stick. So we're paying for all of our transportation in North Kingstown, where these other districts aren't. I don't care what the reason is. Why aren't we getting something for transportation? It seems to me when they're getting so much per student, right, for transportation, why isn't North Kingstown getting so much per student?
Yeah.
So I gave you one of my handouts. I'll certainly follow up with that.
Very good.
I have another two comments, please. One is I would ask our delegation to put a bill in to amend state law that exempts school committees and school districts, which this prior committee last year did in fact make notice of and send to the governor, I believe, that a district that is complying and is conforming to the standards of this state need not spend money for charter schools. When our district is a performing district and we take and send money out of the district, $600,000 in North Kingstown's case, and we're a performing school district, that's taken $600,000 away from the kids in our district, because essentially those kids can come back into our system for the price of papers and pencils, and I think the superintendent would agree with that.
I do.
Okay? So, on that behalf, I would ask that our legislature, you probably won't go anywhere, okay? But I think there's a lot of support with other districts to say, yes, we need charter schools. Yes, we should have them, and there's a need for them. But when the district is not failing, it should not be mandated that we have to send our kids to charter schools. That would bring an immediate $600,000 back into our school district.
Well, Mr. Mudge, as you know, the charter school question is a very controversial one. If the school committee chose to put that forward in the form of a request, I'm sure that we would, the delegation would be prepared to handle that. I will tell you, though, the whole philosophy, and I am not an education specialist. I won't pretend to be expert on these sorts of details, but one of the messages that comes through very loud and clear in the whole new state approach to funding is the money follows the child. And that is a principle that the experts are harping on more and more. So I think you have to.
Well, I certainly understand that, but my point is, these people, these parents of these people can get that education in North Kingstown, whereas what the principle was in terms of the charter schools and the funding was that they couldn't get the education. Their schools were not meeting state standards. And all I'm saying is, if we're meeting the standards, then we should be exempt from the requirement to have to pay for those students, because the parents have another alternative, and that's to send their students to private schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Benson.
First, I want to thank you, Representative Earhart, for the work that you're doing and that you have done for North Kingstown. And I'm not a soap opera addict, but I'm a finance committee addict. And I know exactly what you're going through with. But one of the things I would like to ask you, because all the bills that don't get heard in the other committees, you have the the responsibility of hearing them. And I've always thought that the Finance Committee was a dumping ground to give other people escape, but that's having been there. But how do you think the bill that Dr. Savasi has put in about the length of the school year, what you're hearing, how is that being talked about within the state? Because it is being talked about nationally, the length of the school year and the time that a child loses some of the education during 2 or 3 months. Where do you think that bill is going? It's one of Dr. Savasi's bills.
Ms. Benson, I have to say this is the first I've heard of that particular piece of legislation. Does that indicate it's been put before the Finance Committee?
Yes, it's 5396.
Okay, I can certainly take a look at it, and I don't mean to monopolize the microphone here. I would invite my colleagues, Representative Costin. please don't hesitate to join. Haven't heard about that bill, but be happy to.
Okay,
look
don't
into it. We incidentally, and as you know, Representative Benson, from your experiences, that once the Finance Committee goes into the budget process, we do not hear any other bills. We did hear some general bills up until about 2 weeks ago, yes, and we will take them up again in May. But right now we are strictly on the budget articles.
And so far you're making good progress on the budget articles.
Well, we're reading them. I'm not sure whether we call that progress, but I'll be an optimist.
Okay.
Mrs. Page, did you have anything?
No, just thank you for coming. We really appreciate having you here tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Cerisi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to reiterate and thank our senator and representatives for coming out this evening. I know you have a busy schedule down at the State House and certainly have your work cut out for you this year. The only thing I'd like to comment on, I'd just like to reiterate and concur with Mr. Mudge's comments as far as the charter school issue. I do think they have their place, but not for a district that's outperforming the charter schools. That's one. And the second item was last year when a bill, I believe, was in front of the House for binding arbitration for teachers. This school committee took a vote on a resolution opposing binding arbitration for teachers. I believe it passed unanimously. You and I had spoke about that last year, and I think we were in agreement on that. I understand that bill is coming up again, and I understand that tonight on our agenda we'll be voting again to pass a resolution opposing binding arbitration, and hopefully we can get that done tonight and send that off, that correspondence off to our senator and representatives, so you have that in hand when the sure lively discussion begins down at the State House. So, but thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the three of you coming out here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Cerisi. If I could rewind the clock here just for a minute, we sort of jumped directly into some numbers and details. I did want to start off, and it's certainly not too late to do it, and that is to express my appreciation for being invited here tonight. In the 7 years that I've been in the Assembly, this is the first time that I've ever been invited to appear before the school committee. And I think it's a wonderful idea, and particularly since this seems to be a cordial discussion this evening, I think we're willing to come back and do it again this session, and I certainly hope we make it a regular thing going forward. With respect to the bill that you did rise, and Mr. Chairman, with your agreement, shall we proceed directly to that?
If we could just have Dr. Thornton had something to say. Oh, certainly.
I had one fast one. Why don't you do that first?
Oh, okay. I'm getting overruled. Go ahead.
Well,
this is important.
Let's put the glasses back on again. Exactly as Mr. Cerisi said in your letter to us inviting us to this meeting, you did identify several bills that have to do with various aspects of the arbitration process. I think you specifically identified House 5700, 5701, and 5817 I think were in your letter. Since then, and just last week, an even more challenging bill, 5961, has been filed. So I would request, and I encourage you to, with your efforts this evening, if you have it on your agenda, to pass a resolution in opposition to those bills, and I would encourage you to include House 5961 on that list if you can make that modification now or at some future point. The 5961 is a bit worrisome because the story is, and I haven't seen I haven't been able to verify it, that in fact there were 20. The story is that there were 29 signatures on that bill, which is damn close to it. Excuse me. Darn close to a majority. There was a lot of talk about that bill, and as you know, very often the media tends to get hyped up and get out a bit ahead of themselves. So when you read in the paper that it's about to come out of committee, that isn't necessarily the case, but nonetheless is something that that you cannot afford to be lax on. I know last year when we had hearings on these bills in House Labor, Town Council President came up on that to testify, and let me just see what committees some of those are put in front of. They're probably all going in front of Labor, and we can keep track of the calendar. And in addition to doing your resolution, Mr. Chairman,
if I might, Representative Gerhardt, 5961 goes before Labor tomorrow at the Rise, and so it's important that that if we can, we get that resolution passed tonight, as we did last year.
If you would, I am not on the Labor Committee, but if you do get that passed tonight and the Secretary could get that emailed over to us tomorrow morning, I'm sure that Representative Costa will make sure that a printed copy is hand-delivered to that committee.
I can assure you.
Are you on Labor?
It will be there. It will be there if we pass it.
Or anyone else is driving up that way.
Dr. Thornton?
Hi, good evening. I have one fast one. I'm not sure if you already addressed it. Could you speak to the teacher tenure where it may move from March to May 15 and how that may be coming along?
I think Senator Hodgson may have some insight on that.
Oh, good. You get a chance to sit down, Larry.
Good evening. Members of the committee, thank you for the invitation. And I'd like to thank Representative Earhart. He really is a benefit to all of us to have him as a leader of this delegation. I sit on Senate Labor, and we did hear some pretty heated testimony on two bills related to teacher tenure. And I'm not surprised that it would grab your attention, as it did many superintendents around the state. Senate Bill 71 and I believe it's Senate Bill 403. Both on their face relate to the March 15th date for notifying teachers of prospective layoffs. There is really what I would say is an insidious difference between the two. 403 moves it from, I believe, March 15th to some mid-May. But what it also does surreptitiously is moves seniority from something that can be contracted by yourselves as members of a school committee for rehiring of a teacher to statutorily codifying that as the single most, the driving criteria on rehiring. And so that's why it's been opposed by most of the school departments. I've got to tell you, it received a favorable hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee. I think I was probably the only who was resisting it, although all of the education reform groups and the superintendents and the representatives of school committees that were present endorsed Senate Bill 71, which simply moves the layoff notice to June 1st and testifies strongly against 403, which would codify seniority as the determining factor for layoffs and rehiring. If I missed a resolution or a letter from this committee or Superintendent Thornton, I apologize. It's certainly not too late if there hasn't been one, and it would add to, I think, a critical mass of local control saying that that's absolutely not something we want to codify in state law. And frankly, I'm not aware whether seniority is a sole determining factor for layoffs and rehiring under the current North Kingstown teachers contract. If it is, then maybe something that that might be visited or revisited, but I certainly wouldn't want it in state law forever.
Just to clarify, the basic education plan, the new education law which passed this summer, says it can't be seniority alone. It cannot. So now we're trouble with superintendents because people are trying to do a end run around the basic education plan. That's our concern.
Correct. The position that the NEA has taken to sort of sidestep that is to say, well, in order to be laid off, or in order to be rehired to a position, you have to have maintained your current credentialing process. And by saying that they, and the analogy would be if you lay off 3 11th grade science teachers, you have to rehire somebody who's qualified as an 11th grade science teacher. And because their rehiring to that particular position is dependent on being qualified in that particular position, that seniority is not the only factor you're using. Well, amongst those 3 11th grade science teachers, seniority is going to be the determining factor. So it's clearly a semantics issue, but I think particularly dangerous, especially when you look at local control.
Here's one tied to that, if I could. Also tied to that, I can't recall the bill, but I know there was a heated conversation around race to the top in the new teacher evaluation system, just for everyone's benefit. What's happening now is next year the plan is to have a new teacher and admin eval tool. In the first year, everyone gets evaluated with a baseline of data, every person. To do that, RIDE has to use some folks that are possibly retired teachers. The current state law says retirees can work 90 days for a school district, but not for the state or any other capacity. So RIDE's trying to get it so retirees can work and get trained as evaluators and then help us evaluate the teachers in all the districts. The pushback we're hearing is some folks are lobbying to have teachers on recall be the evaluators, not maybe the veteran people we would like to evaluate the teachers. So we're very concerned as superintendents where if that bill is killed, I'll honestly tell you the capacity for districts to evaluate every teacher comes to a screeching halt. And race to the top will be jeopardized if that doesn't pass.
Dr. Thornton, I would agree for the most part with your characterization of this. I would say that I would have, having sat through that hearing and being familiar with the bill and its the integral part it plays in our race to the top preparations, I really would have to characterize the pushback that I saw in the Labor Committee as being gratuitous fighting with Commissioner Gist. It seems to be some flexing of political muscle to send a message who's in charge. You know, as you indicated, these are positions needed to train the evaluators in the system of evaluation that is going to be part of our Race to the Top program. And it's paid for with federal money to the tune, I believe, of about $500 a day, which I think maybe we all agree might be a little generous for the job, but those, and I recognize federal tax dollars come out of our pockets too, but that is federal money that's going to be coming into the Rhode Island Department of Education to pay for these evaluator trainers. Now, there are a handful of independent educational consultants in the state who are currently equipped to handle this, professional educational consultants. There's another body of individuals who are qualified to handle this that are retired teachers and administrators. The goal, I believe, of Commissioner Gist is to use that federal money to identify a pool of maybe 50 people, around 50 people in Rhode Island and put them to work. And a significant chunk of those people are going to be retired teachers and administrators. If this doesn't go through, the practical effect is the money is still going to be spent. We're going to be bringing in retired administrators and teachers and educational consultants from neighboring states, and they're going to be doing the work at the same cost. We just, for whatever consideration it is to us, we're not going to get the income tax out of these people, and the unions get to say, we told you, Commissioner, that we're the boss. I did raise some questions with the Department of Education. One, you mentioned teacher recall. I don't remember that part of the testimony, but what I asked the Department of Education is, listen, you potentially have a large pool of teachers that are going to be laid off, it sounds like in Providence and who knows where else. And a significant amount of them may be the younger generation of teachers, and I wanted to wrap them into this training process or these evaluation training process, because who better to be intimately familiar with the new model of teacher evaluation than the generation of young teachers that is going to live it, and this will be their whole professional existence. They're going to know this their whole career. The response I got was satisfactory to me, which is time is of the essence. It's got to move now. We can't wait for Providence to identify and let go 15 or 20 qualified teachers to learn this. And there is a real consideration of the feelings of a veteran teacher who has, I should hardly want to talk, but some kid coming in and telling you, this is the way it's going to be. I think those are both valid. Like I said, $500 a day sounds pretty generous, but that's what the Obama administration said. That's what's coming in. So I do think it's a bill that needs to get through. And I think even the governor realizes that, although you never want to hear somebody saying they reluctantly endorse something. Mr. Mudge?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, I have a question.
Might I say something, Mr. Mudge?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. There's a couple of things that I wanted to express to you folks while you're here tonight. It certainly is well known to all of us in the state of Rhode Island that our pension plan has serious flaws and problems that it's long since overdue to having straightened out. I just put you in the situation where you're a young teacher, professional that's in the municipal pension plan, and look at it and say, is this a pension plan or is this a Ponzi scheme? I mean, it makes no sense. You're paying for the problems that exist from bad management, bad planning, and a bad deal. And so you're about to start your life in the workplace, and you have to say, I'm giving them, 8.9%? They want to go up to, 11?
Currently 9.5.
11 or 12% of your money to put it into a pension that we're hearing right now maybe possibly $10 billion out of whack. I say this to you because I feel as though somebody has to say, regardless of what you're doing with the plan, the new hires ought to be treated reasonably and be offered 401k option. Why would I take a job where I know I'm putting in 12% of my income into a plan that is doomed? So I would ask you to very seriously consider that situation and say, and I know you folks are in the minority, I understand, but the people in Rhode Island and the young people that are getting into this program, that's their future that we're playing with. And we've got to change the situation. So I don't want to belabor it. I know we all know what the situation is. We definitely have to do something for the new hires.
I don't think you'll find any disagreement with this delegation.
There's just two other quick things that I'd like to say. It appears to be obvious that the dollars that we spend on some line items that are mandated, both the General Assembly and the public at large don't really know what those dollars amount to. We have a requirement by state law to hire certified registered nurses that are teachers. Okay? They do a job that can be done realistically by an LPN. We don't use them for education. Now, that job costs us, that position, because they're certified RNs, costs us $20,000 per position.
Mr. Welch, as it stands right now, every city and town can petition the General Assembly for relief from those mandates, and I recognize the political difficulty of doing so, particularly when they are, it becomes an argument, well, you're against the kids. We see that editorializing it, and we see real passions at meetings like this when those types of proposals are put on the chopping block. And I don't envy the position that you all sit when somebody, rightly or wrongly, thinks that you're harming their kids' educational experience. There have been a number of efforts in the General Assembly, including my predecessor, Senator Lenahan, Chairman of Government Oversight last year, asking towns for information on the cost to them of unfunded mandates from the state, both in the education and general municipal governance. North Kingstown, to my knowledge, is the only town that responded with any type of information, and thus that project was pretty much left unfinished. So back to what I was saying is I understand the difficulty of folks in your position if you stick your head up into something that might not be popular to ask for relief. And I understand that it's doubly difficult that you're asking the General Assembly for relief from a mandate. All that does is gives you authority. So you take a whack once when you ask for the authority, and then you have to come back down here and actually make that decision. And then you're going to get beat up again too. So the process right now is difficult. We'd like to make it easier for you. I think I can speak for our delegation here that we would like to give you those tools. But I don't see the political will existing in the Assembly as it's constituted now. And thus it requires extraordinary political courage from folks like you to be willing to run that gauntlet.
The last thing I wanted to say to you folks was, please come to us with your questions regarding any legislation pending that would have an effect on education. There's a wealth of information here. Certainly any one of us has an opinion, which may be 7 different ones. But certainly we are a source for information to help you better understand how pending legislation like arbitration, continuing contract situation, et cetera, how it affects us in our budget and the programs that we're trying to do, which are mandated and are costly, and trying to keep the education program that we have as excellent as it is. And in these tight budget problems, that's always a problem. Now, Representative Coster, I know you were going to get up and say something.
May I have one question with him, please?
Sure.
Thank you, Rep. Costa. Senator, I'm going to have a rollover question for Mrs. Rep. Costa, too. One of the things that I was concerned about is it's really perplexing to me is about the use of the talent. Yeah, I know there's some unionism involved in this, which is upsetting to me, but why can't the Department of Ed just contract out for this evaluation service? And if they hire, Representative Earhart, a technical evaluations committee that's qualified to teach and do this evaluation, it's not a quid pro quo. I shouldn't use the rep's name, but just an evaluation committee. And if teachers happen to work for them,
Mr. Rogers, they will. They will hire out-of-state educational consultants to do this work at that cost.
But the company in state somebody could form a company like Free Enterprise, put the company together, use the talent that they want in-house, and the state or Department of Ed could contract out for the service.
This is all within the framework of the Race to the Top grant application. This is all within the approved channels of the Department of Education. Well, so there is no flexibility, to my understanding, to hire, Ed Consultants Incorporated to come in and do the training.
In other words, the federal government came back and told us that we can't use our entrepreneurial system to help us evaluate this situation.
Mr. Mudge, I'm pretty sure they did not include the language that they intend to stifle entrepreneurial spirit in Rhode Island. But what they did authorize was $500 per day per individual to conduct these, qualified individuals to conduct this training. So if we were to go to a private company, if there was a company in Rhode Island that had these 50 people, we would pay that company $500 per person per day, and the only difference would be that it was to a company and not a group of individuals.
Precisely. And they could be, Rhode Island residents and worker bees.
but they have to have sufficient experience and training at the time. And this is something.
They have to get it, yeah.
The woman from the, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but the representative of the Department of Education who spoke, has been in education and public service for a long time, her whole career. She said in her entire governmental experience, she has never been a party to or witnessed a grant application that moved with such a rapid speed of implementation. Time is of the essence. Clearly, this is something that needs to be done if we would want Rhode Island's education system writ large to produce achieving, competent students. And I want to say, to your point about the charter schools, I mean, it's certainly a debatable topic, but I mean, we're kidding ourselves if we don't think the future of our kids in North Kingstown is intimately tied to the future of the kids in Central Falls, Pawtucket, and Providence. Whether they are the future colleagues, subordinates, or managers of the kids that grow out of North Kingstown High School, Rhode Island needs to produce a world-class workforce and world-class citizens. And so it's the charter schools are meant to drive innovation. And I know so close to home, money is paramount. But let's not lose sight of that overall mission. And that's something that I believe in entirely. And I do try to advocate for that at the State House.
Well, I believe it's a slap in the face to our taxpayers. We're spending the money that gives every child an opportunity to get a quality educational program in North Kingstown. Okay? And to have that money go to a charter school, you know, is a slap in the face to our taxpayers.
As I said, it's certainly a legitimately debatable concept of the future of education, and I certainly respect your point of view because $600,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
I'm not minimizing your concern one bit.
And that rolls over to my next question, which I'll have with the rep.
Hand over to my well-spoken
too.
colleague.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Hello there. I'm feeling a little under the weather, so if I pass stuff on to Larry, I hope you bear with me. But I just did want to touch on one point, Mr. Welsh, about the 401k. I did submit a bill. I did submit legislation probably the first week that I was in office that all new hires go into a 401k. Anybody 7 years, 5 years or less go into another 401k with vested. So the legislation is in, Mr. Welsh, and not quite sure how far it's going to get, but that is something that's been worked on. And is that okay? Thanks.
Oh, no, come back. Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yeah, we need to cut it short, Bill. Could you make it quick, please?
You all set?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
Look at you, and this kind of flows into what Senator said, was, you know, we can do what we want in our community. We don't have to fight the tide. And I'm going to give an example. The City of Providence School Committee does not have authority to enter into contracts with their unions. That's because they got an exemption to state law to do that. And, in fact, you raised an issue that I wanted to talk about the bus monitors, okay? And as I understood initially, that your suggestion, which apparently you revised or something, was that you wanted to see that the bus monitors, okay, originally, as I understand it, would not be mandatory for the K through 6 schools. Okay? Now, in principle, I don't have a problem with that, okay, in principle, okay? But again, I believe it should be up to the district to make that decision.
That's what the bill did say, sir.
Okay, well, then, see, it wasn't really advertised like that. But nonetheless, that goes back to...
It was in the bill. If you read the bill, it was
Yeah,
there.
okay.
It wasn't mandatory. It was offered, each city and town needed to save money, they could remove the school bus monitors. It wasn't, that's
Yeah, okay,
exactly
so
what it was.
it wasn't clear to me like that. But again, like the Senator said, is in terms of charter schools or any other issue, we can not really, we don't have to fight the whole tide up there because we can go back through our delegation and ask for specific exemptions to implement those type of things. And that's the thing to do, and we have to work with you folks to get those exemptions if we feel it's in the best interest of our community and not have to fight the bureaucracy up there. So thank you and do a good job.
It's agreed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming this evening and putting up with us and our questions. We appreciate your time. It's a busy time of year for you, and certainly we thank you very much for your time. Mrs. Benson, did you have something?
I had a question for Representative
Okay, go
Foster.
ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mudge touched on the bill about the bus aides and monitors, and I do what make every representative a good representative, that speak with them and give them your ideas and present to them the causes and effect of that piece of legislation. Now, could you tell me, has that gone before the committee, or will it have a committee hearing?
It has gone up in the committee, and there was such an overwhelming response to the bill that, from what I understand, there's going to be another hearing on it. I haven't really been paying too much of attention to it because I'm not on the bill. I'm pretty
you
much
completely removed yourself from the bill?
just like I told you I would, ma'am, when I talked to you on the phone. I am not on that piece of legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And would you keep me informed as to when the hearing is?
I will try.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
That's
very
all.
welcome.
Mr. Cerisi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, while we still have our representatives here, if there are no objections, could we skip down to agenda item 5B on the new business, the resolution opposing binding arbitration on monetary matters for teachers? And at this time, I would offer a motion to approve that resolution. If there's no objection, to move that agenda item at this time.
No, I
I
would second.
second.
Mr. Cerisi, excuse me, it's down for discussion only? So you can move it into old business, but you can't vote on it tonight, according to the agenda that's been published. It's only for discussion only.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention, Ms. Carroll. Okay, so unfortunately, it looks like we've already had a bit of a discussion on it. Hopefully, we can move it into unfinished business on our next agenda and vote on it at that time. So I apologize. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could we possibly have a 5-minute recess at this time?
Yes, we can. Thank you. We're going to break for 5 minutes.
I hope you testify and come not
We're
too
going to start from
busy.
the top of the agenda.
Yeah, going to go back to the beginning. Okay, we're back. Let's see, we left off at citizens' comments, so now we're into routine items. Is there any correspondence? Mrs. Page?
I have a few items of correspondence. I'll go through them quickly because I know that we're moving on in time. But I did receive correspondence from the high school. Congratulations to Jason Zarambi for being the Rhode Island wrestling champion. This is another item I received that's a little old, but congratulations to the cast and crew of West Side Story, especially to Norman Kayaza and Bob Schaefer for the teachers who helped with all that they did a terrific job. I received correspondence from Mr. Jim McGuinn, which I'll turn in, and I think the other things I've sent to Noreen already. Also, Mr. Kenworthy, Dr. Kenworthy sent me correspondence regarding the academic decathlon. Congratulations to Amanda Cirillo, who was the top point total for the MK team. She received a gold medal in speech presentation and a bronze medal in the interview section. Also to Kimberly Nealon, who was also at the academic decathlon, won the gold medal for speech presentation, the silver medal essay, and the gold medal written super quiz. And also to Nicholas Ravelli, who in 9th grade, who received the gold medal written super quiz. They were led by Mr. Doran and Mr. Franz. So there was other students at the Olympic decathlon, and they all did very well. They achieved 8th, which was higher than they had received before. Also, I received correspondence about the art show that is going on over in the North Kingstown Free Library through April 1st. I won't read all of the names of the different students that are there, but I will say congratulations to Kate Peralt, who was recently named one of two of Rhode Island winners in the National Scholastic Art Award. And I believe her artwork is over there. Received correspondence from Lynn Soronin about Ali Shabbat, who coordinated the recent variety show on Friday as a part of her senior project, and I heard from many people that it was a huge hit. Received correspondence from DMS. Congratulations to Ethan Weiland, a grade 6 Team N student at DMS who received the first place award in the Rhode Island State Elks Americanism essay contest. He wrote, "Why I am proud to be an American." So we have lots of good kids here. Also received a nice letter forwarded by Fishing Cove about Sue Warburton and the integrated science, art, writing, and music curriculum that they have that is done in conjunction with going down to the Bay. This was a letter sent by Ron. I believe his last name is pronounced Hershey, but it's not spelled like the candy bar. And lastly, I received correspondence from, I think we all did, from Tony Silvera about the music students. And again, I'm not going to read all the names, but especially congratulations to Kai Colucci, Paul Spatrini, Andrew Winston, who all were ranked #1 in their instrument for the Jazz All-State. So, as I said, we have lots of students to be very proud of.
Thank you. Is there any other correspondence? Mr. Thompson?
I got 2 items of correspondence. One is from a teacher in the East Greenwich system who lives in North Kingstown. She says that she would like to suggest that the school committee survey the teachers in our system and ask them to suggest ways the schools could save money. I think that this is an excellent suggestion, and bring it to your attention for possible action in the future. A second correspondence was actually a discussion with a teacher at the Davisville Middle School. At our last meeting, there was an estimate made that DMS has 18 or 19 smart boards, and that many of these are in the science classrooms. So I asked a teacher at DMS to verify those numbers. Her estimate from on the scene is that DMS has 8 or 9 smart boards, and that there is a smart board in only 1 science classroom at DMS. This new technology has important benefits. It helps to meet the basic educational plan. It lets students interact with modern technology, and it improves our scores in science on the NECAP. I would like to propose that we get a sense of the committee that the middle school science classroom should be equipped with smart boards, and I would ask the committee for their opinions on that issue if anybody wants. That's the end of my correspondence.
Anyone else? Mr. Mudge?
Mr. Chairman, I support Mr. Thompson in terms of picking these issues up and maybe putting them on the agenda for discussion and action in the future. What I'd like to do is hand in two enclosures. Unfortunately, I have one for each school committee member, one of the two, and I don't have them for the others. I didn't run them off, but this is information regarding the summary of budget and state aid that I mentioned when Representative Earhart was here, that shows that North Kingstown came up $210,000 short in terms of what the formula aid was supposed to generate for us this year, but in actual losses from last year's revenue, I believe we're going to be reduced by $163,000 from that standpoint. So I wanted to pass that in and have that recorded. And this is the copy for the chair, which has the second one in there. And one that I have for everyone, I believe, is also the sum total of educational cost was just put out by RIDE based on a 210 UCOA. And it shows what the equalized net per pupil cost is for each school district. North Kingstown is reflected as having for their 4,309 students, roughly a $13,983 cost per student. In 2010, Narragansett, $18,163 for their 1,448 students, and Jamestown, $25,378 per student for their 467 students. I've also had an analysis I've attached to this with regard to this, and I'd like to have it on the agenda and for discussion at the future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mutch. Okay. Continuing on in correspondence, we have a number of pieces that you've all received copies of. One is regarding Mr. August's citizens' comments at the last meeting and answers to the audit and the questions from the audit committee. That issue has been resolved. It's a matter of what date you're using. RIDE uses a different date for the enrollment, et cetera, but that issue has been answered to the satisfaction of the audit committee. You have a letter here from the commissioner to Mrs. Warburton, which expresses a situation at the Fishing Cove School regarding her program with the outside classroom. I think that's good that she has been recognized for her efforts. She did a program for us, was it last year? I think it's nice to have our staff recognized by the commissioner and in a way that shows that we're doing something that's maybe outside of the box and is a real benefit to our young students. There's also a letter in here regarding the work being done by the special ed director. The situation is that she was recognized and the district was recognized as being one of the few districts that are doing their work in reporting on time and complete. It's part of her job to do it, but yet it appears that we're in the minority again of districts that are doing what needs to be done and doing it in a timely fashion. I have sent to this committee a letter requesting that we have a consensus vote on an issue. Much like we did tonight with our representatives, I'm asking for a consensus from this committee to ask the superintendent to request the Washington County Regional Planning Commission put together a meeting of all of the Washington County school committees and town councils, together with the elected representatives and senators, for a public meeting, possibly held at URI, so that we can have an open discussion with them, just like we did tonight, on the different bills that affect education and affect the town budget, so that we can give them background and information on why we can support or why we don't support certain legislation. And as you heard Representative Earhart say tonight, in his 7 years on the General Assembly, this is the first time he's been invited in front of the school committee. I think it's important. He agrees that we do this. So I'm asking if I can get a consensus on this request so that we can have Dr. Thornton ask the Washington County Regional Planning Commission to put together a meeting like this before all of these bills start getting voted on. Mrs. Benson.
I agree with you 100% because collaboration and communication is the key. But I'm wondering, we had a situation like that coming up about sending the letter concerning the
arbitration.
And we were ruled out of place. So are you making a motion for us to discuss that at the next meeting or at this meeting?
No, this isn't a motion. I'm asking for consensus from the committee to give direction to...
That's what I thought you were, but is that proper to even get a consensus?
Mr. Welch, why don't you just tell them that you're going to do it as the chair and have the school have the superintendent do it? In other words, let them know that you're going to ask for this meeting. I don't think that that's anything that has to be voted on.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that somebody didn't think I was overstepping my bounds.
I have no objection.
I have no objection to that thing because that particular time is of a chairman, you know.
Okay. Mr. Mutch?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a great idea. I would suggest that Dr. Thornton maybe pen and ink or develop the letter, but I think the chair should sign it, okay, as a public official, because we really want to meet with all the other public officials.
All right, thank you very much.
Great idea.
Okay. Moving on, executive session, sealing of the minutes.
We need a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session for this evening.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
I oppose. There was subject to changes that were did.
We're talking about tonight's meeting.
This isn't the minutes you're approving, Mr. Mudge. This is just sealing the executive session minutes.
Sealing of the minutes for tonight's meeting.
Okay, I beg your pardon. I thought that was the prior meeting. Okay.
We haven't gotten to that
Yep.
one yet.
Sorry.
Okay, so it's, what, 5 with 1 abstention. In favor. Okay. Disclosure of the executive session votes.
For March 8th.
Okay, yep. All members were present at tonight's executive session except Larry Cerisi and Linda Avanzato. On the agenda item, NEA grievance regarding step adjustments. Motion was made by Mel Benson that the 2 teachers receive their compensation with the same procedure as was done with Mr. Ibel, seconded by Kim Page. The motion passed 5-0. Motion was made by Mel Benson to adjourn executive session and go into open, seconded by Kim Page. Motion passed 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We have minutes to be approved for the executive session, March 8th.
Mr. Welch, I believe this item is going to be tabled until the next meeting.
Okay.
Which,
for both?
Those were the ones
No.
you were talking
The executive session minutes of March 8th, there was some discussion in executive session. Those are going to be tabled.
Oh, okay.
excuse me, that's on the consent agenda?
No. Yes, on the consent.
Okay, so before we can get there, we should be
All right, let me just
Step back a bit.
Let me just go backwards for a second. There are two items in the consent agenda that are being tabled tonight at the request of the superintendent. One would be item E, approval of administrators' contracts. And the other one would be item L, non-renewal memorandum of agreement of administrator. Both of those are being tabled at the request of the superintendent.
Do we vote on that?
No.
Actually, he's
I think we
removed-
have to, yeah, don't we?
He's not tabling them, he's removing them from the agenda.
But I think they have to be
They
voted
are on the
removed.
agenda. I'd like to speak to one of them, and I just wondered if that's something we vote on, or is that done unilaterally?
Well, let's do it this way, I would suggest. In terms of the consent agenda, I would like to have everything, okay, in the consent agenda exempted. Then we can speak to each item as they come up. And that will allow you, Mr. Thompson, to, bring up any questions regarding each of the items.
Okay, normally under a consent agenda, these are the items that the superintendent is making a recommendation to you that you approve. The superintendent this evening has asked that two of his agenda items, E, approval of administrative contracts, and L, be removed. He's not going to put them forward this evening. So since a consent agenda is an agenda where he's making the recommendation, he's now pulling them off the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Thompson?
I'm asking, just for clarification again, I meant to speak to one of those items tonight. Now I'm hearing it's being removed from the consent agenda. Do we vote to that? Do we vote approval of that, or do we not?
No, not until it comes up on the agenda again.
No,
Mr. Mudge?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that it is on the consent agenda, and once something is on the consent agenda, it cannot be removed unless the body agrees to move it. That's why I have making the recommendation that all items on the consent agenda, all items, okay, be exempted, and we can discuss each and every one of these.
Mr. Cerisi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's 9:10. Our meeting adjournment time is at 10 o'clock. We haven't even gotten into the consent agenda yet. Can we please move on this agenda, please, and not have to discuss every item, even the most minute item, so we can please get some work done this evening, please?
I have asked for every item to be exempted.
Make a motion. Make a motion.
Mrs. Page?
I would move that we approve the minutes of March 8th, 2011.
Oh, excuse me, I have made a motion to exempt every item under the consent.
Where do we go here?
Under the consent agenda.
I don't understand this.
Is there a second of Mr. Mudge's?
To remove everything from the consent agenda. Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I'll discuss. I would like, we have many things on our agenda that we need to get forward to. We have policies on here. We have awards and bids to approve. We have lots of things to talk about. And while I really appreciated talking to our representatives tonight, we cannot go through the consent agenda and take each item individually. I would say if there's something you really need to speak to, then that would be good to take it off. But we can't spend all the time talking about each individual item. And that's part of what we're supposed to be coming here to be prepared to do, that items that we've talked about the superintendent ahead of time that you agree with, that we can go ahead and pass those. And things that you don't agree with would be appropriate to take them off and to discuss them. But to take everything off, especially when some of the things are just reports, will really bog us down. So I would say that, no, I do not want to exempt everything, just some things.
Okay, let's take a vote on it. Roll call vote, please.
Excuse me. I think the procedure is that if a member wants something exempted, that's his prerogative. Because I want to speak to each one of these, and I'm not going to talk about minibus drivers, draft contract, janitorial RFP. I'm not putting those things out without a discussion. Okay? Contract with the waste haulers. We're talking about IT operations, a contract going out for $40,000. We're talking about schedules for the school committee. We're talking about East Bay Collaborative. These are not insignificant items. They're not routine items. Okay? Then that's the consent agenda. It was supposed to be routine items. It wasn't supposed to be items of the magnitude that we have on here. For example, personal actions and appointments. Personnel action and appointments. Who are they? Former employee requests for inclusion in the life insurance. Who's that? What's that all about? Don't you think that rises to the level that we should have a discussion on? I'm not going to approve this agenda carte blanche. So I call the question to exempt the entire agenda.
Yes, Dr. Thornton.
Just for the school committee's edification, as you know, from those of you who asked for it, we have given you approximately 280 pages of information to study prior to the meeting. The point is to study before the meeting.
I'm not saying I'm not going to study. I want to talk about it because I have looked at these items, and I have a lot of things, a lot of comments to make on them.
Okay, let's call the vote on the motion. Yes, Mrs. Benson?
We did have the 280 pages. And if the other members, I can't speak for nobody but myself, I studied them. But I think the confusion is we have never come to a conclusion as to what a consent agenda should be. And normally, and according to Robert Rules of Order, a consent agenda is those routine things. And to point blank, I want to speak about something that's listed under the consent agenda. And about the time, we're just going to have to schedule extra meetings. This is the busiest time of the year because I really want to go in detail about the minibus contract. We received the contracts. I read them. I want to go into detail about the cafeteria. We received all the information about that. And just to slide through it, but yet everything on the consent agenda shouldn't have to discuss. Not everything, but there are some things that's important. So you don't have a choice.
Mrs. Benson, I don't think anyone suggested that we were going to slide through the business, and as past school committees have operated, items have been exempted for discussion, not the whole consent agenda.
Well, okay. I wanted to make that clear, if you didn't mind, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cerisi.
Mr. Chairman, a motion's been made and seconded. Could we please call the question and move on?
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask one question of our counsel, please?
Sure.
Counsel, do I have a right to exempt an item on the agenda? What is my right as a school committee member?
Yes, you have a right.
Okay? And what action is required if I exercise that right?
The past practice of this committee has been any school...
No, not the past practice. What's the law?
Well, not all school districts have a consent agenda, but it's been the past practice of this committee that if any school committee member wants to exempt an item, that item is exempted.
Thank you. I want every item exempted. Thank you.
That's what his motion is.
So I don't think it's subject to a vote.
Well, you made a motion and it was seconded.
Well, I understand. It wasn't necessary, but it was seconded. So therefore,
motion, we can just take every item.
Well, yeah,
that's what she just said.
I want to take every item. Yeah.
No, that's what she said.
Well, if every item is exempted, then I guess there's no motion on the floor.
Right. Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of March 8, 2011.
I second that one.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Oh, it's
Motion
Judy,
carries.
Joe, that's yours, isn't it?
One abstention. Mrs. Page.
I'd make a motion that we approve the monthly financial reports for January 2011.
Second.
Comment. Is that D11?
Yes.
Yes.
The monthly financial update.
Mr. Thompson.
I would like to discuss some possible changes to the monthly report format. It consists of a cover page with written updates of various economic issues, and it's backed up with spreadsheets. There is also a listing of official expenses from the school checkbook written during the period, sorted in a random format that's not very useful. The monthly financial update does not contain a single line graph. There is no line showing where we are, what we've spent so far, what's the target line we want to be working to achieve to get to the total spending target that was set by the town council for this year. Let me give you a very short update on where we should be right now. We have been a school committee since December 6th. If you take the fiscal year we were in, FY11, July 1, 2010 through June 30, 2011, and divide that into 2-week periods, you have 26 slices. Think of it as a calzone. The fiscal year is a calzone, and every 2 weeks you cut off a slice and examine it. By this reckoning, we have been a committee during slices 12 through 19 of those 26 slices. That is 1/3 of the fiscal year. If, and this is a big if, the total spending for FY11 was budgeted to be $60 million, we should have exercised oversight as of today over the spending of $20 million. Think of that. As I sit here today, I cannot visualize whether we're above the line or below the line because I haven't seen a line. My suggestions for the changes to the monthly financial update: 1, provide a biweekly line graph for the committee. I've worked with these at CBC Davisville and can show you how we did them. They are pretty straightforward. 2, sort the checkbook in order of highest to lowest so we can focus on the important items first. 3, the third change is more related to the communication media used. Any spreadsheets should be in hard copy. We have to be able to read the numbers and be able to see the whole sheet in one glance. In those hand readers, which are obsolete, by the way, we cannot read the numbers and still be able to analyze all the data at one glance. And besides, for some reason, they're always displayed up and down, sideways. Going back to the checkbook page in the monthly report, I would like to ask a question of the business manager, and I don't need an answer tonight, but I would appreciate some clarification at the next meeting. If we took the total dollar expense of those pages in the checkbook and added the automatic checks that are cut from some computer program, such as teachers' salaries, recurring automatic numbers, would those numbers add up to the total expenses of the school department in that period? And if not, what other numbers should be included to get the total expense of the reporting period? That's what I need in order to know what I'm doing up here as far as economics in this school committee. With this as a recurring report to the committee, knowing the total of expenses against the target and being able to visualize through a line graph the trend in spending, we would have a tool to be able to track and oversee the budget and perform our due diligence over the financial operation of the schools. Thank you.
Is there an action on that you asked for?
No, sir.
I think there was a motion by Mrs. Page to approve D1, and I think I seconded it.
Okay, any more discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Mrs. Page.
I make a motion that we approve the financial reports for February.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain.
One abstention? Mrs. Page?
I make a motion that we approve the year-to-date budget report for February.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Mrs. Page?
I make a motion that we approve the monthly quarterly deficit report for February 2011.
Is there a second?
Discussion on that, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, Mr. Bunch?
Yes, sir. The deficit report, have we taken any action? I think I asked this in a prior meeting to be on the agenda regarding the requirement to notify the Auditor General of an anticipated deficit on the school cafeteria fund. Have we taken any action to notify the Auditor General of that particular deficit?
If I remember correctly, your question was answered prior to tonight, that it only is as it relates to the entire budget is the deficit report required, not on an individual item. Is that not correct, Dr. Thornton?
I think that, Mr. Chairman, in due respect, I would like to get a legal opinion because I think that is an incorrect assessment.
Mrs. Carroll, can you give us an opinion on that, please?
Mr. Welch, I'd like to give you a written opinion rather than answer off the cuff. It's my understanding that because this committee took an action so that that wasn't going to be a deficit by transferring the money in, then that wouldn't be considered an account that's going to be deficit spent because you as a committee took that action. But let me look into it and let me make sure and let me give you a written opinion.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Mudge?
Madam Chair, Counsel, I don't think this committee took that action, number one.
No, it was the previous committee that
but the action was never taken, I don't think, okay, in terms of that. Nonetheless, that's the part of the solution that you give to the Attorney General. I have a deficit, and this is how I'm going to handle it. So while I may agree with you, okay, that in fact we have a solution, but we still have to identify the deficit and how we're going to remediate that deficit.
Thank you, Mr. Mudge.
And that's why I'd like that opinion addressed, please. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Mrs. Page?
I make a motion that we approve the request for a variance from the Board of Regents regarding the North Kingstown VOTEC boundaries.
Second.
Any discussion?
Where are you?
We skipped E, but that's okay.
What happened to
Yeah.
E? Yeah, what happened to E1?
E was removed by the superintendent, and he's not recommending
I
it.
see E1 on the agenda, and I'd like to speak to it.
I have a motion on the table for F.
Well, let's.
We can go back to E after we do F, please.
Yep.
We have a motion and a second on the request for a variance from the Board of Regents regarding the VOTEC boundaries. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, we'll go back to E, which has been removed as a recommendation by the superintendent for this agenda. Yes, Mr. Thompson.
Go ahead. I'd like to say that I don't believe the superintendent of schools has the authority, not that I disagree with what he wants to do, to remove an item from the agenda. Once it's on this agenda, I think it's the responsibility of the school committee to remove it by vote.
I think so, too.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Carroll, do you have
If he wants to take it off, I'll support it, but I think
Ms.
we need
Carroll?
to approve it.
If these items are on the recommendation of the superintendent. If the superintendent is not going to make a recommendation on an item, then you can't, there's nothing for you to vote on, because he's got to make the recommendation having anything to do with these items. So if he's removing it, it means that he's not making a recommendation tonight. He's asking for more time. He's pulling it off the agenda.
And the only thing that we can do is vote up or down on his recommendation.
Oh, absolutely, I agree with that. But we have to vote up or down on it. That's all I'm saying. So he can't do it unilaterally. He has a reason, and then we vote on it. That's absolutely correct. I would support that. So if you want to make a motion to take that off the agenda, then we can do it.
Mrs. Benson?
I thought we discussed, I'm sure we did, a bit of that in executive when we voted to do it. And
No, we never discussed.
No. We never voted to do this in executive.
No.
But the one question I want to ask, can the superintendent give us a future date that he will have his recommendations ready? Let's have a date set. Give him as much time as he needs. If it's June 15th, then we'll know when to expect it from him.
Mr. Cerisi.
Motion to table E1.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion?
The whole list?
No.
E1.
E1.
Agenda item E1.
Yeah, E1. That's what we're talking about.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Thompson?
I'd like to ask the superintendent why he's wanting to remove E1 from the agenda.
I'm not prepared to recommend those contracts tonight.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, the motion has been made to, yes, Mrs. Benson.
I'm sorry, but I have to have the understanding. I'm representing the people.
Yes, Mrs. Benson.
Does that include every one of them?
E1 is the entire list.
The entire list?
Correct.
Can you give us when you will be able to have a recommendation, maybe set a target date, 3 meetings or what?
Target date would be next meeting.
The target date would be the next meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Yes, Mrs. Page.
I make a motion that we approve the amended 2011-2012 school committee meeting schedule.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Yes, Mrs. Page.
Well, I would like to discuss the school calendar. And I know that Mr. Avedisian has been here to discuss the school calendar. I will say I talked to the superintendent earlier today about the school calendar because I don't particularly like the I think we ought to take the religious holidays off the school calendar, but I know that there are some contractual issues. And the other thing I talked to him about was the November election date, but I know that that is also statutory. That would be something I should probably write to our representatives about, because if we don't have an election, I don't see any point that we have to take off election day. So I guess.
Those are good points.
But I'm prepared, when I talked to the superintendent today, I'm prepared that he has said that basically that he's looking at this calendar, that we need to have a calendar out there. I would like to really discuss the calendar for the following year and do that early and hopefully get some of these things that we've long talked about in making calendar corrections really part of what we do for the following year.
I don't know why we can't put it on the agenda right away, get it, the next couple of meetings.
Make a motion. I'd make a motion to do that.
Mr. Thompson.
On this calendar, I think I wrote this to the whole committee, so I hope that you heard what I had to say, that it has Friday, December 23 listed as a school day, and this year Christmas falls on a Sunday. Many families are going to be traveling and pulling their kids out of school on Friday, December 23rd, thereby creating extra work, extra homework, extra tests from the school staff, and so on. Those students who do show up will not be in the best potential frame of mind to concentrate on their studies, and both of those above would not be conducive to meeting the BEP. And therefore, I would like to see that Friday, December 23rd, be added to the holiday recess, making that read December 23 to 30, and that the last day for students be changed by 1 day out to June 15th. And I believe there are other changes that are wanting to be spoken to out here in the
Are you making a motion on that, Mr. Thompson?
I would move that the day of Friday, December 23rd, be added to the holiday recess, making that read December 23 to 30, and that the last day for students be changed to June 15th, subject to other changes that are going to be recommended.
Is there a second on the motion?
I second that one for discussion purposes.
Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Mudge.
Because Mrs. I support Mr. Thompson on this, but because Mr. Page has some other comments, I would suggest that maybe we just table this for a couple of meetings and everyone come back and put down everything that they think should be changed, and then we can talk about it at one time.
Dr. Thornton?
Just a few thoughts. I know in talking to Mrs. Page earlier, we talked about trying to get ahead of this where this year's calendar and the next year's calendar. It's my sincere hope that as a practice going forward, we could actually approve a year in advance, if you will. But in terms of this calendar, There's a lot of pressure on us to get a calendar out already for next year. I really can't wait much longer for next year's calendar. There's a lot of things that come into play with the calendar we publish, so it's a lot of stress on us to get this one out pretty soon. The one a year from now, we're going to have all those conversations and certainly approve that one, I would think, even the spring for the following year. But for this year's calendar, I'd ask if we could try to expedite the changes.
Mr. Thompson?
I'm familiar with one letter that came from one individual who likes to plan very, very far ahead, asking us to get this calendar out. I'm not familiar with more pressure. Can you specify other pressure that you've received?
Sure. In terms of internal pressure, we do a lot of planning for trainings, PD. We report our calendars to RIDE, and the longer we wait, the more problematic it is to do our planning. Like I said, I really think doing 1 year at a time, for a lot of reasons, is problematic. That's why I really encourage us, after we tackle this one, to always be a year out so we can be thoughtful and take our time. This has been on the agenda for, I want to say, at least 2 months, if not longer. So I'm really looking to get something through if I could.
Well, there's a motion on the floor.
Mr. Chairman?
And by the way, the December concept would be fine. That put us to June 15. I would just say, if you do any more changes, be cognizant of the snow factor. And if we had 4 snow days this year, that would put us to June 19, which is still doable. No, I'm sorry, not June 19. That would put us to, help me here, June 20, 22, 21, which is still doable. So that's something we can do.
Mrs. Page?
Well, I guess I look at the day before of any vacation is always just kind of a play day. And so you're just merely pushing off the play day from 23rd to 22nd. So it's a sort of thing, especially at the elementary level, I would rather have, if you're not going to have a bunch of kids there, and, you know, part of me is like, school goes until the 23rd. If a parent chooses to take their kid out, that's their problem. But school goes until the 23rd, and I don't want to have the kids then going an extra day in the hot summer, whereas they can just, at the elementary level, it is an educational day. And so I know a lot of the play is also educationally based, and I applaud teachers who do that. I think at the other grades, they still are working. So I don't want to push one more day off to the end of the year into the 15th, because that does give us to Friday, and that gives us no snow days. And here in the high school, especially in the 3rd floor, it gets very hot to have the kids go that 3rd week in June. So I would say no. I would rather have the kids go on the 23rd as much as possible. And yes, Christmas is on a Sunday, but they'll live.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Not the calendar, no. Yes, Mr. Mudd.
I'm a little perplexed here at what we're doing. I support Mr. Thompson's motion, but and I recognize the superintendent's needs, and I certainly support that. So between what the superintendent wants to do and Mr. Thompson wants to do, we have now other considerations Mrs. Page would like to bring up in terms of removing religious holidays. So that's quite a discussion. So are we going to vote on Mr. Thompson's recommendation and then address the religious holidays? Or
yes.
Okay, that's good. So then we can go up and down with the religious holidays. Get it done tonight.
Right.
Sure. Thank you.
Mrs. Benson?
I just have one comment to make, and it's this, that the United States Department of Education debated 1 week ago to extending the schools in all states. Summer school. They used Alaska as an example. And I don't speak for comedy. So what are we going to do if it's extended? What are we going to do if schools are to go on way in the summer and the heat? Because they're talking about extending the school year.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
And nationally, you know, the report is students in America are behind. This will be a thing from the federal government. So maybe we should discuss this and not use heat as a barometer, because you never go to school in Florida. That's all I have to say.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on Mr. Thompson's motion to take December 23rd off the school calendar as a day off. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Opposed? It's 3-3, the motion doesn't carry. Okay, let's go on the calendar as it's presented. Have a motion, please? I need a second. There's no second on the calendar as it stands.
I'll second it merely because I do want to, I know we need a calendar and table, but I would like to give Mr. Avedisian a chance to speak. And I know I'd like to move on the calendar question in future conversations as Dr. Thornton and I talked about.
I would suggest that, yes, we can certainly listen to Mr. Avedisian. I would suggest that the future calendar is the one to be working on. Changing the religious holidays at this point in time is really late in the game for this year.
Yeah, I've been working on school calendar with my students and various members of the school committee for 3 to 4 years now. And this is not a new topic as far as removal of the religious holidays or extending certain vacations or moving vacations. We actually sent home a survey. It's all parents. I believe last year we got 10% of the surveys back. Currently, the way I understand it from RIDE, you have to submit a school calendar by April 30th through eRide. So you are kind of pressed for time. I would personally like to see a big discussion on this and some more feedback from the parents, but I think obviously you are pressed for time. One of the things I think you should do, because next year's calendar, where the holidays fall next year, a lot of them are on the weekend, and there's no primary day. Primary day is a day out of school. I think last year was September 14th. And everyone was kind of blown away that we had to close school for that. And the law reads currently right now that even if schools are not used, you have to close school. So if you were using fire stations, senior center, I would ask the school committee, since you're in the mode of asking your reps to do things, that they amend that bill or that law to read that if schools are not used, they can remain open. I think that would go a long way to streamlining the calendar because it could be 2 years from now where you have, if you decide not to change the religious holidays, you could have primary day off. Rosh Hashanah is actually a 2-day holiday, not a 1-day. Yom Kippur could fall in the middle of the week. You have Good Friday, and who knows what other religious holidays you might follow. I'd also advocate that I have looked at various other school calendars, and the 3 that I looked at were Newport, Coventry, and Jamestown, because those are the 3 school calendars which we impact or they impact us. Jamestown has not started school before September 1st for students for the past 3 years. And that was one of the recommendations of the calendar committee last year. It had overwhelming support by the parents in the 90th percentile. The parents who disagreed with it said they should start after Labor Day. And then I looked at Newport, and I did look at Coventry. Both their calendars for next year are out. Jamestown is waiting for our calendar to come out before they decide to do anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avedisian. Dr. Thornton.
I'll just some feedback for the committee. If you think back to last year, I had tasked Dr. Auger with chairing a calendar subcommittee, and they did meet for a few meetings. And at the end of the day, I believe we did implement all but one of the recommendations from the subcommittee last year. Just for your thinking.
Thank you.
Could we get a report of that from last year? Because there is a law that states that one school committee is not obligated to go along with other than financial matters from one school committee to the other. But I don't think we would be that contentious that we couldn't follow that committee.
I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you're obligated. I'm just saying we gave it some thought with the subcommittee. That's my only point.
Well, you say we got out, they got out a list and they all were passed.
Dr. J can speak to that if you want.
Well, you're superintendent. Could we get a list of the ones that all of us passed? And I think that would save a lot of discussion because we'd have a framework to go from on this time. Save us a lot of discussion and a lot of time.
If it would save discussion, I would be happy to forward the list.
Mrs. Page.
I'd like to add an amendment to the motion that we pass the 2011-2012 calendar with the caveat that we will have a calendar committee in place to decide on the 2012-2013 calendar before June 30th.
Did you have any members in mind, Mrs. Page?
No, it'll be voluntary.
Oh, okay.
I will ask Dr. Ogier once again to chair that subcommittee.
I second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton.
Okay, so that's,
Oh, you won.
that's an amendment to the motion. Okay, we're voting on the amendment to the motion as given by Mrs. Page. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Okay, now the main motion was to accept the calendar as proposed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Yes, Mrs. Page.
I make a motion that we approve the alert contract.
What is this now?
This is H1.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes?
Yes, Mr. Mudge.
Mr. Chairman, this is the IT operations review.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I at one time, I wasn't really going to get involved in this because I know you put a lot of time into this and other people have. But as I look back at this contract, I find that this contract isn't one that is about the kids or about the system. It is about poor government. Let me reemphasize, it's about poor government. The fact that we and the town council and the school administration and the municipalities cannot get together and review this proposal, okay, and come up with some in-house recommendations is appalling to me. Mr. Chairman, you did say in a couple of meetings ago that, you did point the finger at the town, and I'm not taking anybody's sides, that the town, in fact, would not cooperate, okay, with the school committee. I think that's basically what you said.
No.
No, okay, I'll stand to be corrected. I thought that you said the town manager was the one that was inhibiting the consolidation effort.
Consolidation has been slowed up to a snail's pace by lack of progress from the town side, in particular the town manager.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So, and again, I appreciate that comment, and I understand that. So, see, my view is that this contract, first of all, is flawed from a standpoint, at least from my opinion, that it's asking for things that aren't necessary. I believe it's a waste of $36,000 of taxpayers' money, and I believe we can do the job in-house.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there, Mr.
Yep.
Mudge. In the conversations that we've had with both the town side and the school side, this is an arm's-length transaction because we, the town and the school department, do not have the expertise to look at their IT situation in a manner that would be objective. We went out.
So you don't trust the town municipality?
Don't put that. That's not trust.
Well, you said you didn't have an
Please
objective.
Are you going to let me finish?
Well, you didn't let me finish, sir, because I had the motion here. Could I finish then my statement?
Go
please?
ahead.
Okay.
Mislead the public, though.
Okay. Now, listen, I'm here to answer all the questions. The bottom line is, apparently, we as elected officials, school committee officials, or town council officials, can't get our subordinates to get together and resolve this issue. Now, sir, what we simply need to do, and I'm recommending, is that we, in fact, go back and do this job in-house by merely requiring the superintendent of schools, just like in your house, is to define what his IT requirements are, his phone requirements, down to the desktop, if he needs, including Wi-Fi, including cable service, including telephone service. We can put out and get a specification basically on our service requirements. I don't care if they have 20,000 servers in the school department right now. I don't care if they need X, Y, or Z, just like in your house. You have Cox or you have Verizon. You make choices on what you want, and you tell them, I want the service here, here, and here. The school department should be able to do that. And then we have a specification of our needs. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I don't want to have somebody to redesign our system. I want a service, and I want it to the desktop. Now, either the town can provide it or it can't. My recommendation is give the school committee a month to define exactly what the services are at the desktop level if they have to, at any desktop, at the room level. Let the town look at it. Let the town bid on that service. If we're not satisfied with that, what they can provide it for the cost, then we put that service out to bid, period. We don't have to go back, Mr. Chairman, and look at the qualifications of our people. We don't have to look at the qualifications of the townspeople. My God, we're putting out a contract, okay, a contract for janitorial services. We didn't ask the people that are providing the janitorial services what the capabilities of our janitorial staff was. We didn't ask that people to come back and say, gee, our janitors are good, they're not good, or anything else. I mean, the contract is basically flawed. And I think it comes back to us as elected officials to spend our money wisely, cost-effectively, and in the interest of the taxpayers. And this contract doesn't do that, and it's a reflection on poor government, including the school committee and including the town council, that we can't get together and work this thing out. Thank you.
Mr. Cerisi?
Mr. Chairman, there's been a motion made to approve this and seconded, and we're discussion. Is that where we're?
Yes.
My understanding that this IT consultant or consolidation has been on the agenda of the consolidation subcommittee since it was originally formed almost 4 years ago. And it's been a continuing discussion. This contract is now a recommendation of the consolidation subcommittee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we've discussed this for approximately 4 years?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Thompson?
Sure.
I come at this a little bit of a different angle than Mr. Mudge, but I guess I get to the same place. What I'm hearing is that we've already had a 4-year delay in the consolidation of the IT services between the school and the town. And so tonight, all of a sudden, everyone is going, let's go, let's go, let's go. This is after 4 years has gone by. And we're going all the way to, I'm not sure what state. Is it Minnesota? We're going all the way to Minnesota. We're spending $36,000 of tax money that could be used in the classrooms of our schools in order to bring a group in who simply, their only purpose is so that our school and our town can stay at arm's length from this process. And we'll have this group come in. We know what they're going to say. Yes, you should consolidate, and here's how to do it. And they'll come up with these position descriptions and who reports to who and all that good stuff. I'm astonished that we don't have the capability and the technology in the schools and in the town, and some of the people who have been writing to me and saying, you know, that they can do this kind of stuff, and Mr. Mudge is aware of this. What we lack is the will, as he says, and I'm agreeing with you, Bill, to sit our two sides down and say, you guys are going to do this and make it happen. So in a sense, I'm trying to move this ahead, Mr. Welch. I think if you go out with this contract to the ELERT and bring them in and spend this $36,000, now we're just going to spend another, how many months? 2 months, 3 months, 4 months? And have them look this whole situation over. I would like to see us move ahead with consolidating the IT of the town and the schools and do it ourselves, save the $36,000, but I'm ready to get moving on this project now. I do not want to wait. That's my comment. Thank you.
Mrs. Page.
Mr. Chairman?
So for 4 years, we've had problems with moving ahead. So this contract is not to emphasize our differences. It is merely to emphasize where we've come together. It is looking at, over the 4 years, we've said, you're right, we haven't been able to always agree, but the one thing both the town and the schools could agree on was that somebody coming from the outside to assess the situation would be totally unbiased and would be somebody who they would both accept. This was the company that the Consolidation Committee suggested because of their knowledge, their background, because of what they brought here. This is the culmination of the two working together. So to look at this as the culmination of 4 years of disagreement is the wrong way to look at it. This is 4 years of finally coming together, finding something they could agree on, and saying, this is where we want to go with this contract. If we approve what the Consolidation Committee has recommended, we will move forward, because both sides have said this is somebody who they like, they would take their word, they would move forward. If we don't go with this, we have not been able to figure out who would be the unbiased. And this, both sides agree, is unbiased, and we will move this forward. So I understand what you're saying, but for the last 4 years, those of us who have lived this, we say this will help us, and if we don't do it, we are stuck.
Stuck.
I just want to, just a moment, please.
Thank you.
I just want to add that the $36,000 is split between the town and the school.
Correct.
And it's been reviewed by both of the attorneys for the town and the school. It's had a lot of review, and so, you know, we're sitting here tonight, the town has already approved it, and because you don't think that it's appropriate, Mr. Mudge, or you, Mr. Thompson, that why hurry now? I'm sorry, I disagree with you, and it isn't a question of not trusting our employees, and I don't believe, quite frankly, that the employees of either side are capable of judging their own work and being objective. And that's what part of the problem is here, in getting people to, from the outside, give an objective view of what we have in total, both sides. And then we get to review the report that they come up with and decide what it is that we want to do. I think it's about time that we move the question.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I understand what you're saying. I understand what Mrs. Page is saying. Mrs. Page, I'm not sure if you're a contract engineer or not, or a contract lawyer, or anybody else. The basic contract is flawed. The basic contract should be saying, I'm a school department, I need this service. Just like you buy your service for your Verizon at home or your Cox cable, you define what you want, and they'll come in, one of them will give you the best bid. We haven't done that, okay? We need to be sharing like services with the community, okay? And all I'm saying is, this is a step to define our requirements. We don't care who provides that. We could put this out for contract. I would suggest we define the contract, what we need, where we need it, how much we need, and then let the town bid on it. If we don't like the bid, put it out on the street to bid that specification. Now, again, I'm saying, give this process a 3-month trial. You have the school committee, the school administration, identify to the detail what they need and where, and then we'll give it to the town, ask the town to bid on it, and then we go to the next step. But it's a waste of taxpayers' money not to do that. And I would ask you this. This is $36,000. Can anybody tell me how much money we're going to lose by delaying this for 3 months? I'm saying we can save $36,000. How? 4 years now. How much money are we going to save or lose by delaying this for 3 months? Can anybody give me that figure? The answer is no.
Mr. Cerisi?
Okay. The answer is no.
Mr. Chairman, could we please call the question on this agenda item?
Read the motion.
Reread the motion.
The motion is by Mrs. Page is to approve the Ellett contract as it was presented, and it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
No. No.
Motion carries. Mrs. Page?
I would motion that we approve the minibus RFP.
I'm ashamed of you.
Second.
I'm ashamed.
Will they just be ashamed?
We have a second on the
We've been
minibus?
working on this too long.
Sorry.
Second.
What are we doing? We just wasted $30,000.
Any discussion on the motion?
I have a discussion.
Mrs. Benson?
I was being detracted, Mr. Whomever made the motion. Would you state your motion again?
Yes, my motion was to approve the minibus RFP.
Okay, we've had a motion with a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay.
Please let the minutes reflect.
Mrs. Benson said no. Okay. Mrs. Page?
I would make a motion that we approve the janitorial RFP.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
No. How many noes?
2.
Mrs. Page?
I make a motion that we approve the Ideas Consulting Richter Picture purchase.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Thompson?
I would like to ask or move an amendment to the motion that any expense or obligation on this agenda item be postponed to the next meeting. And before I ask for a second, just here are my short thoughts. Canceling this contract would save $12,400 from the budget. Postponement would be prudent so we could determine if there's any wording in law or regulation requiring these particular photographs to be provided by a commercial source outside the schools. From my observation of the student photography program, which we already support financially, we are well equipped to provide any kind of photographic services in-house. I would move to postpone this item for further review.
I'll second the motion.
All right.
That motion is an amendment.
I would like to amend the motions on the table that we postpone this item for further review.
Okay, and there's been a second by Mr. Mudge. Dr. Thornton?
Just for clarification, and Ned, please help me out if
Speak
I
out, Dr.
don't.
Thornton. We can't hear you down here. You're not using your mic.
Ned, please assist me if I don't get the whole story here. Richard Picture is not simply a photography studio. Richard Picture is the scaffolding for the senior project, which we do. You know, kids present senior projects. So this is a yearly recurring piece that we do. The good news I can tell you is, as we go forward with Aspen, our new student information system, we're hoping in the next version of Aspen, like Aspen 5.0, if you will, there may be an ability to get rid of Richard Picture the following year. Just as right now you've heard of Connect Ed, we call home. Right now we're still Connect Ed on tonight's agenda. We're hearing in the next version of Aspen, that may go as well. But for right now, we do need Richard Picture to do the senior components at the high school, if you will. It's a yearly recurring thing we do. We first contracted with them a couple of years back, and they have made basically the skeleton for the senior projects. If that makes sense.
Mrs. Page?
And it's my understanding that they also use the skeleton for the e-portfolios.
That's correct.
Well, I will say, since this will be something that my son needs to do next year, my personal feeling is that we really need this. I do not want my son to be kept from graduating because he doesn't have Richter Picture to be able to do his e-portfolio. And I know this is pretty paramount for all the kids to be able to have something that works very well. In talking to some of the juniors this year, they can't afford to have any time lost with basically a system going down. This has been a proven computer program that we've used, and so that would be why I would support it in the future.
And please note that there's been a change in the dollar amount. You should all have a copy of this change in front of you.
Madam Chairman, one question, please.
Yes, Mr. Mudge.
Dr. Thorne, I kind of missed something on that in terms of, is this a software program, or is this a...
It's essentially a software program that several districts, when we went online for senior projects, districts all had to choose what they're going to do for the skeleton of software to do the presentations and the portfolios. Some chose Richard Picture, some, Phil Helmy and Sharo, they chose something called Sakai, I think it's called.
Yeah.
So different flavors out there, but Richard
It's a
Picture-
canned program you need,
It's a
basically,
canned program
software
you need.
program.
This is the program for the electronic portfolio. It's not a photographer taking pictures.
Yeah, okay, so it's a canned, specialized program. Fine, thank you.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the motion that needs to have a vote on it.
All right, I'm going to withdraw my amendment because it's I believe,
It was your second, right?
yeah.
I'll withdraw the amendment.
Okay.
Okay, the amendment motion has been withdrawn, so now we need to vote on the original motion by Mrs. Page to approve the contract for Richard Pitcher. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimous. Mrs. Page,
I make a motion that we approve School Dude.
is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Yes, Mrs. Page.
I would make a motion that we approve the Connect Ed agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Yes, Mrs. Page.
I'd make a motion that we approve the fire alarm panel for the administration building.
Is there a second?
Second, after reading it, it is very much needed.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. Mr. Cerisi votes no. Yes, Mrs. Page.
On the trash hauler, Dr. Thurton, what is the or maybe it's Mr. Draper, what is the recommendation for which trash hauler to approve?
Waste haulers?
I'd make a motion that we approve waste haulers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Mudge.
What is the contract cost?
That's a good question.
I want to know what the contract cost is that I'm going to approve for this project. That it really should be on here. In other words, the contract should be waste haulers for X amount of dollars.
It's 43,000.
But it's not on the agenda. See, it should, those numbers should be on the agenda so we can see these things. And the public can see these. So the motion is
In your
to...
packet, you'll find the information, Mr. Mudge.
I understand, but the public should see this, and what we're saying is, and it should be recorded, and I'd hate to be a nitpicker, but it should be that the North Kingstown School Department awards a contract to waste haulers in the amount of such and such. I mean, that's just good professional, and it's specific. So if you put the amount on there, then I'll support it.
Totally right. That's totally right.
I guess I'm confused. We have
But
a
he's-
process now with the agenda reporting form. We have an agenda reporting form listed out completely with a dollar amount. So I'm confused how we're not complying with our process.
But, may I, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Dr. Thornton, I understand what the form says, and I understand what comes over here. All I'm saying is the public should know what the cost is, and we should be voting on that cost to approve that tonight. You just said, okay, you want to select, okay, waste haulers. I want to approve the correct, by the way, the town council does this all the time. They vote on that.
If I could say something, I think something didn't come over in what is on your agenda, because what I'm seeing is, remember how we did the old agenda reporting forms that had the descriptive term?
Right here.
Like the one we...
Right here, it's the first page.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, I don't find it either.
It's agenda reporting form, and it's cost $40,056, and it's page 233 of your packet.
Right. But, like the council, I think the cost should be identified, just like the previous one. I should have been smart enough to do that.
But what I'm saying, Mr. Mudge, is that was presented in the packet. I understand what you're saying relative to the digital packet. I'm trying to find that now.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah,
did
I
submit.
don't see it either. Yeah.
But
I know what you're
regardless,
saying.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. It should be on the agenda of what we're approving.
Much
Excuse me if I
much
could-
like we did the has the dollar amount?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I believe Mrs. Carroll is looking at that, and I'm not sure why I can't find it here, but I know we submitted that.
But again,
understand what
I
you're
don't
saying.
care where it's there. It should be on our, be posted on the agenda, and it should be voted upon the specific amount. It shouldn't be hidden, in between the lines. It should be visible so we know what we're voting on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mutch. I think the point's well taken.
Thank you.
I don't, evidently it's a glitch. It's not by intention, because if it was done like the Ellett contract, the dollar amount would be there. And so,
Mr. Chairman, we asked them to identify what the cost then was for the fire alarm panel also. I think it's appropriate that it be recorded as well.
sure. Can we make sure that gets on the record, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. East Bay Education, Special Education. We got to go back. I'm sorry, I got to go back to 8, the waste haulers contract. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Yes, Mrs. Page.
I make a motion that we approve the East Bay, Bay Education, Special Education Professional Development.
I second that motion.
Is there any discussion?
Very
on
well written.
Any discussion on the motion?
Mr.
Yes, Mrs. Benson.
I would just like to say that it was very well written and quite understandable, and it's something that we can use, and it will benefit our students.
Yes, Mrs. Benson. Thank you. Mr. Mudge?
Again, I would note, could we note the amount of money, please?
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know what the amount of money is?
Once again,
$5,500.
in your backup, $5,500 in the backup. Please
Say
read the
what?
backup.
Okay, but I think the point that Mr. Mudge is trying to make, and I agree with what his point is, that when you go to the town council, and like we did with the Ellett, the dollar amount is presented with the line item so that the public can look at it, because they don't see the backup. And that's, I believe that's all you're trying to say, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Mudge.
Yes, sir.
And I think that's worthy of noting, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Besides being worthy of noting, excuse me for speaking out.
Yes, ma'am.
But I would like to add to what you said, beside of being worthy of noting, could you suggest that we make that a point that after this date, that those things will be included?
Yeah, I think that the message is clear, Mrs.
Did they
Benson.
get that message?
I think so.
Okay, I'll hold you responsible
Okay.
if they haven't got the message.
I'm going to be
If they
held
don't get the
responsible
message,
that
it's
they
something.
understood. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I have one request.
Yes.
We are happy to do that, but I would also ask the committee to read their backup so we know what we're voting on.
Say what?
Yes. Okay.
Dr. Martin?
I would
I
ask,
read the backup, that's why I
I would
voted
ask
for
that
it,
the
and I
committee,
said...
the committee read the backup.
Okay, well, you make sure you put the price on it, and we read the backup.
Okay. Can we move on, please? It's
To
getting
report to
late.
you about the reading of the backup. I'll come in and we'll have a quiz on it. You can quiz me on it.
That'd be fine, Mrs. Benson.
Okay. That's enough of your insinuations.
Okay, we need a vote on the East Bay Education, Special Education, Professional Development. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Subject to the number getting on there, sir.
Yes, it'll be made part of
Thank
the
you.
record, Mr.
Thank
Mudge.
you.
Thank you.
Nice work.
Mrs. Page.
I make a motion that we approve the student assistance services for $36,875.
Second.
This is something that this is somebody who we've had, this isn't a new person, this is a person who we've had, it is in our budget that we've already approved. And I talked to Dr. Thornton today, and he basically said he was put it on here because it was over $5,000. So that was why he wanted to. I know Jessica Wilkie does a wonderful job here as our student assistance counselor, and I'd like to see that continue.
Is there any discussion on Mrs. Benson?
No discussions, but
Mr. Chairman?
reading the backup, it is very essential, and we also discussed that in budget meeting. It's very essential that we have those things.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Mudge?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My question here is, and I've had this concern for other times, so this is basically a general question, is, when we say the operating budget, that means it's going to be, it's in the operating budget for fiscal year 12, the budget you propose. In other words, we're not going to use, what am I saying? We're not going to use surplus. In other words, it's in the $58 million budget that you presented to us?
That's correct. Here's the quick story.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's correct.
That's
fine. I just want to know.
That's
Thank you.
correct.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Before we get into the next item, DMS roof condition, Dr. Thornton, can you explain this, why it's even on the agenda?
Sure. Last meeting, some member of the committee asked us to pull the roof. We had to clarify the documentation. We had inadvertently left SMMA on the document, when in actuality, after all was said and done, we were looking and talking with Eagle and not, in the end, talking about SMMA for this correspondence. We struck it, took SMMA off, and give it back to you to consider tonight.
All right, but I'm reading through the backup here, and I don't really, I have to plead ignorance. I don't really understand how this backup relates to the specification of the roof replacement at Davisville Middle School. No. Mr. Draper, can you?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why the agenda items we put together that specified, as we just talked about, the costs and some of that, are not viewable by the committee.
Ms. Carroll has the printed copy, but you're correct, it's not coming through on the link here. This is what it looks like, though. This is the backup we redid. It didn't come through.
Are you on the link?
We have this page. This page came through, Mr. Welch, right?
Yes.
But not that front page.
Right.
According to the IQM2 item that I have that should be before you, I can read it into the minutes if you like. It's item 1055.
Do we have a push on this?
There's no action required by the committee.
Oh,
What do you mean there's no action required? Why is it on it? There's no action required. What's the cost associated with this?
There was no cost associated. The reason we provided the balance of information was because we were not asking the committee to take action. We wanted to give you an update on the findings of our review of the roof.
okay, so
So you want to take it off the agenda is what you're saying?
it was my understanding.
It was information relative to that bid item that we had on the last agenda.
But it was my understanding that we were going to then submit an RFP for the specification to replace the roof.
We didn't recommend action until after we get approval from RIDE for our entire package.
Well, we have, wait a minute. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Just a second, Mr. Mudge. So, and why would we wait to put the RFP out prior to getting the okay from RIDE? Why would that be a problem?
Because we can wrap this project into whatever other roofing projects that we get the approval from RIDE and try to get a lower price overall.
When would you expect that we would have some answer from RIDE that we could go forward with the RFP?
As of right now, the timeline is approximately May.
The whole month of May, the 1st of May?
It depends on when it goes to the Board of Regents.
Okay. Mr. Mudge?
Mr. Chairman, I'm confused also. First of all, we had apparently, we're switching contractors, I guess.
No, quite
Okay,
frankly,
from
the
Eagle?
SMMA is the architect that put together the information, reviewing all of the school committee, all of the school buildings, for us to then, through the facilities committee, determine what we would go to bond for as being absolutely necessary.
Right.
Okay. They then went to SMMA for a price to write the specification for the roof replacement at Davisville Middle School. That number came in, it was a telephone number with an area code, okay, which was totally unacceptable. So at this point in time, when that came in, we stopped that process, and that's why I was asking about when we were going out for the RFP to put out for bid to the general market for the roofing specification.
Right, but what was mentioned about Eagle, are they going to do?
Well, they would be one of the bidders on the roofing project
Oh,
itself.
once it's
Once
on
we
the
get
street.
once we get the specification and it goes out for bid, they would be one of the people, certainly, that would want to bid on it.
Okay, so then this change to Eagle really is, that was mentioned to us, is really insignificant, means nothing.
They did a tour of the building with
Right.
Mr. Draper and Mr. Cahoon to determine the current status of the roof.
Also, with respect to what you said, Mr. Chairman, if we have a requirement for a roof, these requirements should have been to RIDE months and months ago.
They are.
Okay, well, if they went to RIDE, then why can't we put the contract out? We don't have to wait.
Because it's under the Phase 2 approval.
Phase-
We're in a Phase 2 approval of for the $22 million bond issue that's in front of RIDE, less the Noresco, which we agreed upon doing.
Right.
Okay? So that's in front of RIDE right now for review and approval by the regions.
But nonetheless, Mr. Chairman, if that was just a school capital reserve program, we would still get funded for the school capital reserve program. And see, I think we're getting wrapped around this issue, whereas if we want to get this out, okay, if it's a bond, right, then we're never going to get this on the street, because don't we have to go to the town to get approval for the bond? And suppose we don't get approval for the bond.
You're getting a little ahead of yourself. First of all,
Okay.
anytime you spend more than $500,000, regardless of whether there's any housing aid involved,
Right.
has to be approved by RIDE.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So even if you were going to do it out of cash, it has to be approved by RIDE.
Right.
All right. Now, what we found out from the Eagle reviewing the roof with our staff was that with the possible exception of maybe somewhere between $25,000 to $30,000 worth of maintenance possibly on the roof as it exists, we should be able to get through to the next construction season, which would be a year from now.
Okay.
Now, the bond is hopefully going to go, once we get the approval from RIDE, and we go before the legislature looking for the approval to put it out for a bond, hopefully that'd be around November.
Sure.
Okay?
Yep.
Once we get the bond approved, then we're able to go to contract to have the work done in the next construction season, which would be a year from this summer.
Okay, so I think you've wrapped this up for me, because we don't really need to take any action right at this moment, because we may sink $25,000 in to carry us over, but the real implementation isn't until a year from now.
Right, but the only thing that I was talking about was the RFP for the specification. That's really not going to change.
Yeah, okay,
All
okay,
right.
okay. So your recommendation is?
Well, at this point in time, I don't,
There's nothing to
no
do.
action, we just move
Yeah,
along.
thank you.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you mind explaining that again for me? I was take it from the top.
You buy me a large decaf, and I'll
Better get a It is, we are not even out of our consent agenda yet. It is now 10:15, 15 minutes past our school committee meeting policy adjournment deadline. So if you're going to continue beyond the deadline, it's going to require a motion to continue beyond the deadline. I'm not going to offer that motion. I'm going to offer a motion to adjourn at this time.
Is there a second to adjourn?
I'd like to finish up a few things, if we could go until 10:30, 15 more minutes.
I'm leaving
Then
either
there's
way.
a
so
motion,
I don't-
Mrs. Page.
I'm leaving either way. I don't care.
Because he said he was going to make his in the motion.
Is there a second on Mr. Cerisi's motion? I'll second the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Motion to adjourn. Okay, and hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Nay.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night, Mrs. Cerisi. Mrs. Page.
I make a motion that we approve the former employee inclusion in the life insurance pool.
I
Second.
motion.
Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I support this, sir, okay? But is it, we say an employee, is this an issue that is, the employee's name has to be It's maintained some privacy or something?
There ain't confidentiality with this, Mrs.
You know,
Carroll?
I don't...
No.
Excuse me?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. So, in fact, the individual's name who we're extending this to, which I support, okay, is not subject to privacy or anything.
We're not discussing job performance, it's just...
Yeah, right. So, thank you. I was just wondering why it wasn't on the agenda.
No other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I oppose. Mrs. Page,
I would make a motion, we approve the CLEC officers.
do we know who they are?
Yes, it was in our packet.
Everything is in the back.
It was in our packet, so I read it, Dr.
Well,
Bowden.
you get the papers. I went looking for it earlier, and I didn't find it. You found it on
Nice
there?
letter from Mrs. Souza.
Yeah. At the
Is
bottom
that
of the
enough
letter,
proof that I read?
under her name, Dawn Souza, you see parents to approve as voting members, chairperson of CLAC, chairperson Judy Matatucci, voting members, Dawn Souza, Ellen, et cetera, et cetera. You see all the names there.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion and a second. Mr. Mudge?
Yes, Mrs. Benson, as the representative to CLAC, have you, what's your comments on the, appreciate your comments on the offices?
The parents who have students, which is a federal requirement, and I think that the people that they selected for offices, I wasn't at the last meeting, but Mrs. Souza, who sent the letter, is a very outstanding parent, and I read the whole packet. I read the whole packet. Do I get that D off of my report card, Dr. Butler?
Well, Mr. Chairman, so you're supporting the nominations?
I am supporting them.
That's what I want to know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any more discussion?
No.
Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Yes, Mrs. Page?
I make a motion that we approve the personnel items in K.
The entire item?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Whoa. Uncertified staff.
I'll second it. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Thompson?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to request that we come up with a personnel management and position management subcommittee so that we can take, as soon as we have a transfer or a retirement or a resignation, and number four is an appointment, so we're going to add on another person to the school, to the body of the school. So just taking those first three, I would like to have a subcommittee look these positions over and see if we can eliminate them for the future.
Yes, Mrs. Page.
Normally, when we want a new subcommittee, we ask the member to draw up a charter of basically of what you would want to have in the subcommittee and then people who you would want to have with that, and you put it on under new business for the committee. And once then we discuss it, then it moves up to the next meeting to old business, and we can vote on the charge to put the committee together.
Thank you. I'll do that.
However, Mr. Thompson, personnel issues are the prerogative of the superintendent. So even if a committee member said something's not needed or something is needed, it's only going to go by his recommendation.
Mr. Mudge, did you have a saying?
In other words, if you form a subcommittee and you try to review positions to determine whether they're needed or they're not needed, really the subcommittee is going to have no power and have no say because all personnel is at the discretion of the superintendent.
Thank you, because you're making my exact point, which I've been making to the school committee and to the town. The only way that we're going to reduce taxes in this town is by taking the bag of money that we keep giving to the superintendent and squeeze that down. And then he's going to be motivated to go look and see where he can cut jobs.
So I guess you don't want a
And
superintendent.
I agree with you. Wait a minute. I'm
I guess you
speaking.
don't want a
I'm
superintendent to do
speaking.
your job.
Why
don't you do the job, Joe?
It's not my job, as the lawyer has
You're
just
correct.
pointed out.
You're correct.
Thank
It's
you.
not.
But the citizens of this town have paid too many taxes for too long, and that's because we keep giving more and more and more money to the school department. The only way we're going to motivate this school department to reduce the amount of employees of this school, of the school itself, is by lowering the amount of money that we're giving them in that checkbook. And we didn't do it this year. Thank you.
Mr. Mudge?
I'm not, I think I understand what you're saying, Mr. Thompson. I want to make sure that I do, though. I think what you're saying is that perhaps maybe there should be a subcommittee that that the superintendent works with, you know, and he gives his, just like on anything else, budget or anything else, he gives his inputs, you know, and discussions and so forth and so on. And then, you know, which kind of synthesizes, you know, the issues with a committee of a couple people. And then when they do come to the committee, in fact, you've had a couple committee members, okay, interface with the superintendent and basically set the stage for a vote. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, it's not doing your job. And in other words, it's an intermediary step that we could answer any questions, so forth and so on, clear up any issues. And then when it does come to the committee, hopefully it'll just float right through. So, you know, from that perspective, I think that's a pretty good idea. So,
Take it. There's a motion on the table. It's been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Mrs. Benson, how did you vote?
Neither way, but I will vote.
Personnel items.
Say, well, it's a personnel item. And I remember what it is. I'm not quite there yet, but I'll have a lot of company when I go. I vote yes.
Okay, the motion carries 3-2. Yes, Mrs. Page.
The last thing I'll bring up here is I make a motion to approve the two policies, JE and JER. The policy committee has made these recommendations of these minor changes to the policies that are on our agenda, so I would ask the committee to approve both of them.
Second the motion.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing no opposed, motion carries. Now have a motion to adjourn.
No.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight.